The famous Seven Wonders are just the beginning of a much larger story. History's true canvas is far richer, dotted with architectural marvels, technological feats, and sacred sites that have vanished into myth and earth. This is a journey to uncover 50 lost wonders beyond that famous list. You will gain a complete tour of forgotten cities, sunken temples, and impossible monuments that prove human ambition knew no bounds. How did an entire civilization build a metropolis of stone and then simply walk away? What incredible machine, lost for 1,000 years, predicted eclipses with gears? Each site is a testament to ingenuity and a puzzle waiting for modern explorers. We are about to walk through the echoes of what was, and in doing so, rediscover the relentless spirit that built our world. What vanished achievement do you think would most change our view of the past? The legend begins with a king's devotion and a queen's longing. According to ancient tales, King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon built a staggering artificial mountain of greenery, a verdant paradise rising in the dry Mesopotamian air, all to comfort his wife who missed the lush hills of her homeland. It is a story of love and power, of human ingenuity defying nature itself. For centuries, this image of the Hanging Gardens has been fixed in our collective imagination, a symbol of opulent beauty. Yet, this wonder presents us with history's first great puzzle in our list. Despite its legendary status and detailed descriptions from respected classical authors like Strabo, who wrote of tiered terraces, shaded walkways, and sophisticated screw pumps lifting water from the Euphrates River, archaeologists digging at the site of ancient Babylon have found nothing that conclusively matches this description. No grand irrigation channels, no specific foundation designed for such a colossal structure. This absence is the core of the mystery. How could something so famously described leave no physical trace? Experts have proposed fascinating theories. Some suggest the gardens were not in Babylon at all, but rather in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh, built by a different king a century earlier, and that the story simply migrated over time. Others argue it was a real marvel of hydraulic engineering, built from mud, brick, and lush vegetation, materials that would have eroded completely back into the dust over two, leaving only the stories behind. And a compelling school of thought wonders if the Hanging Gardens were never a physical place, but rather a poetic ideal, a beautiful fiction that captured the essence of what a truly wondrous garden should be. So we are left with a haunting question. Was this first wonder on our journey a breathtaking reality, lost to time, or was it the ancient world's most captivating piece of propaganda, a myth that outlasted stone and mortar? This exploration of a possibly mythical wonder perfectly sets the stage for our journey ahead, because many of the sites to come were undoubtedly real. Their stones have been found, their foundations mapped, yet their full stories remain just as elusive, waiting in the silence. Herodotus stood before a structure that, in his own words, made the pyramids seem trivial. The Greek historian, traveling through Egypt in the 5th century before the Common Era, recorded a visit to a labyrinth near Lake that belief. He described a single colossal roof covering 3,000 rooms, half below ground and half above, a maze of endless corridors, vast courtyards, and towering temples dedicated to every god of Egypt. His account was so staggering that many later scholars dismissed it as the exaggeration of a wide-eyed traveler. Yet, what if he was not exaggerating, but was instead one of the last people to witness a wonder already slipping into ruin? The key to this mystery lies not with the pharaohs of Giza, but with a later ruler, the third of the 12th dynasty. His grand mortuary temple, built at a site called, is believed by many Egyptologists to be the very labyrinth Herodotus saw. This was no mere tomb, but a sprawling complex designed as the beating heart of a region. It served a dual, fascinating purpose. On one level, it was a vast administrative center, a palace of bureaucracy where the business of the entire nome or province was conducted. On another, it was a profound sacred space, a temple complex for the worship of the crocodile god, where ritual and governance were intertwined. Centuries later, the archaeologist Flinders excavated at and found something extraordinary, a foundation platform of stone and mud bricks so immense it could only have supported a building of palatial scale. He uncovered no towering walls, but a giant's footprint in the earth, exactly the kind of evidence you would expect from a structure whose stone had been away over. The labyrinth's true form remains a tantalizing puzzle, a maze built not just of stone, but of history itself. Our search for this center of earthly power now turns toward wonders built for a different kind of authority, monuments raised not to administer life, but to honor what comes after. The sun god Helios received a tribute like no other from the grateful people of Rhodes. After surviving a grueling year-long siege by a powerful enemy in the early 3rd century before the Common Era, the island city decided to celebrate its hard-won freedom and honor its divine patron not with a simple temple, but with a giant. They pooled the wealth left behind by the retreating army and commissioned a bronze statue of Helios, so immense it would redefine the word colossal for all time. For 12 long years, the sculptor Charles of and his team labored, building the god limb by limb. They constructed a stone pedestal, then an iron and stone frame, carefully affixing hammered bronze plates to create the gleaming skin of the Titan. When the scaffolding finally came down, the people of Rhodes beheld a marvel. The Colossus stood approximately 110 feet tall, rivaling the height of the modern Statue of Liberty. For just over 60 years, this bronze giant was the first and last sight for every ship entering the bustling harbor, a breathtaking symbol of resilience and devotion. Then the earth moved. A powerful earthquake around 226 before the Common Era shattered the statue at its knees, sending the god tumbling to the ground in massive bronze fragments. The oracle consulted afterward forbade its reconstruction, so there it lay, a magnificent ruin. For nearly 9 centuries, travelers made pilgrimages just to see the fallen giant, awed by the size of its thumb, which few could wrap their arms around. It was a wonder even in its broken state. Eventually, in the 7th century of the Common Era, foreign rulers sold the bronze for scrap, requiring a caravan of nearly 1,000 camels to haul it all away. Today, we know it only from descriptions, which has led to centuries of debate. Did it truly straddle the harbor entrance, as romantic illustrations suggest? Most historians now think that unlikely, as the engineering feat would have been nearly impossible and would have blocked the harbor for the entire lengthy construction. It was more likely posed on a prominent pedestal near the port, one arm perhaps raised, holding a torch. Its brief, glorious stand and long, poignant ruin remind us that human achievement, no matter how towering, exists in a fragile balance with the forces of nature. While one wonder fell to the shaking earth, others were swallowed whole by a different, more patient force, sinking silently beneath the waves to wait for rediscovery. The Mediterranean seabed held its secret for over 1,000 years. Then in the year 2000, underwater archaeologist and his team made a discovery that rewrote maps and history books. Off the coast of Egypt, the silt parted to reveal a forest of colossal statues, their stone faces gazing upward through the water, surrounded by scattered gold coins, towering temple gateways, and massive inscribed slabs known as steles. They had not found a shipwreck, but an entire drowned city. This was known to the Greeks as Egypt's legendary gateway to the world. For centuries before the founding of Alexandria, this was the bustling, vital port where all trade from the Mediterranean flowed into the Nile. Every ship, every merchant, every tribute from foreign lands had to stop here first, making it the empire's primary customs house and a center of immense wealth and cultural exchange. It was also a profound religious hub, a major center for the cult of Amun, where pharaohs were believed to receive their divine right to rule. The city was a true melting pot, a place where Egyptian deities met Greek heroes, and where languages and goods from across the ancient world mingled in its markets and temples. Then, sometime around the 2nd century before the Common Era, it was gone. The likely culprit was a combination of natural forces, a perfect storm of soil liquefaction, where the soft clay beneath the city simply gave way during an earthquake, and the relentless, gradual rise of sea levels. The land sank, and the Mediterranean poured in, swallowing the metropolis whole. The artifacts recovered from the silty time capsule are breathtaking. A giant red granite statue of the Nile god Hapi, symbol of abundance, lies peacefully on the ocean floor. A beautifully inscribed black granite stele, a decree from Pharaoh I, was found perfectly preserved, its message untouched by time. The remains of grand ritual barges, used in sacred processions, speak to the city's deep spiritual life. Each find is a whisper from a drowned world. Rediscovery forces us to ask a thrilling question. If one of the ancient world's most important ports could vanish so completely, what other coastal metropolises, what other centers of commerce and culture, now sleep silently beneath the waves, waiting for their story to be told? This sunken gateway reminds us that the map of the past is still being drawn, not just on land, but in the silent, patient dark of the deep sea. From a city lost to water, we journey to one consumed by an entirely different and far more deliberate element. A single column stands in a swampy field, all that remains of a building so magnificent it was destroyed and rebuilt not once, but twice. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus holds its place among the famous seven, but its story is one of multiple wonders, each version lost to a different chapter of human history. The first great temple was a gift of staggering wealth, funded by the legendary King Croesus of Lydia in the 6th century before the Common Era. It was a marvel of marble and cedar, adorned with exquisite sculptures. Yet this first wonder met a fiery, infamous end, set ablaze by a man named, who sought immortal fame through an act of destruction. His name did become a byword for vanity, but the people of Ephesus were undeterred. They vowed to build an even grander temple, and for over a century they did. The replacement was a true titan, over 400 feet long and supported by 127 60-foot-tall columns, each a single piece of marble. It became far more than a religious site. It functioned as one of the ancient world's most secure banks, a sanctuary for those seeking protection, and a pilgrimage destination that drew visitors from across the Mediterranean. Its interior was a gallery of lost masterpieces, housing sculptures by the most renowned artists of the age, works known today only through Roman copies and the glowing descriptions of ancient writers. This second temple stood for centuries, a symbol of resilience. But history had one more chapter to write. After being damaged by Gothic raids in the 3rd century of the Common Era, it was rebuilt a final time, only to be systematically dismantled during the Christian era. Its beautiful marble was carted away to build churches, fortifications, and other structures, a common fate for pagan monuments. The great wonder was not toppled by a single cataclysm, but was slowly taken apart, stone by precious stone, until only foundations and that one lonely column were left. A wonder, it seems, can be lost many times over to fire, to conflict, and finally to the quiet recycling of history. While one marvel was taken apart for its stone, another was surrendered completely to the relentless, living embrace of the earth itself. Deep in the dense, green heart of the rainforest, a legend persisted for 500 years. Spanish conquistadors returning from the Americas spoke in hushed tones of a white city of immense wealth, ruled by a monkey god, hidden somewhere in the impenetrable jungle of Honduras. For centuries, it was dismissed as just another fevered dream of gold-hungry explorers, a myth as elusive as the mist that clung to the canopy. Then, modern technology gave the old stories a startling new voice. Using airborne LiDAR, a laser mapping system that can see through the thickest vegetation, researchers in 2012 surveyed the region from above. The scans peeled back the leafy blanket to reveal something astonishing beneath: the clear, geometric footprints of human civilization. There were not just a few scattered ruins, but vast, organized urban layouts with plazas, pyramids, terraces, and irrigation canals, all untouched for centuries. This was no small village, it was a lost city, or perhaps even a lost network of cities. In 2015, a ground expedition, led by archaeologists and guided by those digital maps, finally hacked its way to the heart of the mystery. What they found was a time capsule. There were stone sculptures, including vessels carved with animal effigies, resting exactly where they had been left. A ceremonial matade, a stone table for grinding, lay in a central plaza. Most remarkably, a cache of over 500 artifacts, including finely carved stone seats and ceremonial vessels, was found completely pristine, untouched by looters. This site, likely belonging to a pre-Columbian culture, perhaps related to the people or distant ancestors of the Maya, offered something incredibly rare, an unfiltered, unsullied window into a mysterious civilization. Because it was never ransacked, every object tells a true story about the people who lived there, about their rituals, their artistry, and their daily life. The silence of the city, however, poses its own profound question. What caused such a sophisticated society to abandon this place entirely, leaving their belongings behind as if they intended to return? Researchers suggest a combination of factors, from the arrival of European illnesses that swept ahead of the explorers themselves, to possible internal societal shifts or environmental pressures. The jungle did not destroy this city, it simply embraced it, guarding its secrets until we had the eyes to see. This discovery in Honduras is a powerful reminder that lost wonders are not confined to the deserts of Egypt or the coasts of the Mediterranean. They exist on every continent, wading in the earth, under the waves, and deep within the world's last unexplored jungles. From a city reclaimed by the living forest, we now travel to a monument that was never meant to be found at all, a tomb hidden so perfectly it became a legend in its own right. The true wonder was never just a building, but the living, breathing idea it contained. The Library of Alexandria was not merely a storehouse for scrolls, but the world's first great research institution, a powerhouse of the mind called the Mauseon, or the Shrine of the Muses. Here, the greatest thinkers of the age were supported by the state to do nothing but think, debate, and discover. Their mission was staggeringly ambitious, to collect a copy of every single book in the known world. Agents were dispatched to ports with instructions to board every incoming ship, search for texts, and have them on the spot for the library's collection. This was the intellectual capital of the ancient world, a central processing unit for human knowledge. Its loss, however, is one of history's most misunderstood tragedies. It was not a single, dramatic fire that erased it all in one night, but a slow, painful decline over centuries. A conflict involving Julius Caesar did lead to a fire in the docks area that may have damaged a storage annex. Later, as religious and political winds shifted, the institution faced periods of neglect, the dispersal of scholars, and the eventual repurposing of its materials. The final chapter came with the Arab conquest in the 7th century, a transition that sealed its fate. The true cost is incalculable. Imagine the works that vanished, texts on subjects from the theoretical mechanics of steam to advanced astronomy, from lost plays of Sophocles to entire histories of civilizations that left no other record. Each lost scroll was a unique thread in the tapestry of human understanding, now forever frayed. Yet, the library's legacy persists like a shattered mirror, its reflections scattered. Fragments of its collected knowledge survived because copies had been made and circulated, quoted by later scholars in Persia, the Byzantine Empire, and the Islamic world, who preserved and built upon those ideas. So we are left with a haunting, personal question. If you could recover just one of those vanished scrolls from the silent halls of Alexandria, what lost knowledge would you choose to bring back into the light? This repository of human thought shows that some wonders are built not from stone, but from ideas, and their shadows can be the longest of all. From a center of intellectual power, we journey now to a monument of a very different kind of power, one that was not recorded in scrolls, but felt in the very bones of the earth. Sponge divers off the coast of a Greek island in 1900, and one were hunting for treasure, but not the kind they ultimately found. Their prize, pulled from the wreck of a Roman cargo ship, was a corroded, lumpy mass of bronze and wood, so encrusted it seemed like little more than junk. It was, and shelved, a curiosity among far more beautiful statues and glassware. Decades would pass before anyone realized that this unassuming artifact was, in fact, one of the most important mechanical discoveries in history, an ancient computer that rewrote our understanding of Greek technology. We now call it the mechanism. Modern analysis, using advanced imaging like CT scans, has slowly peeled back the layers of corrosion to reveal a miniature cosmos of precision. This was not a simple clock. It was an intricate astronomical calculator, a device of genius that could predict solar and lunar eclipses, track the complex movements of the sun and moon through the zodiac, and even calendar the cycles of major athletic games like the Olympics. Its front dials displayed the Egyptian calendar and the Greek zodiac, while its back housed dials for eclipse prediction and a lunisolar calendar. To operate it, you would turn a hand crank, and through a symphony of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, the heavens would move on the dials in accordance with the actual sky. The sophistication is breathtaking, employing mathematical principles not thought to have been used in clockwork until over 1,000 years later. Where did it come from? The leading theory points to the legacy of the great inventor Archimedes. While the mechanism itself dates to around 100 years after his time, its design principles suggest a direct lineage from his school of thought, a tradition of mechanical genius that was carried forward and then, tragically, lost. This single device forces us to ask profound questions. What other advanced technologies, what other marvels of engineering were created in antiquity only to vanish, their secrets buried with their makers? The mechanism is a wonder lost not in place, for we hold its pieces, but in understanding. It is a ghost from a possible future that never arrived, a whisper of a technological path that history forgot to take. The silent precision of the mechanism finds its echo in a different kind of perfection, one carved from solid rock and left hanging in midair. Within the cool, shadowed halls of the temple in India, a single granite pillar does not quite meet the floor. Visitors are invited to slide a thin piece of cloth, or even a sheet of paper, through the slender gap beneath its base, a physical proof of a gravitational defiance that has lasted for nearly 500 years. This is the hanging pillar, a masterpiece of 16th century engineering that continues to baffle architects and engineers today. Local lore adds a layer of intrigue to its mystery, suggesting that during the British colonial era, an engineer, desperate to understand how it was balanced, attempted to shift the pillar. The act disturbed its perfect equilibrium, and try as they might, the craftsmen of the time could never get it to hang quite right again. Whether fact or cautionary tale, the story underscores the pillar's fragile secret. The true wonder is in the execution. Carved from a single block of granite, the pillar is part of a larger forest of sculpted columns in the temple's main hall. Yet this one alone is engineered with such an exquisite understanding of weight distribution and stress points that it appears to float, supporting a portion of the ceiling above it while seemingly touching nothing below. The sculptors of the empire, working without modern tools or computer models, possessed a profound, intuitive knowledge of physics and stone. Their achievement here is a quiet, static counterpoint to the whirring gears of the Greek mechanism, both representing peaks of technical knowledge. The pillar is just one marvel in a temple filled with them. Outside sits a colossal monolithic statue of the sacred bull Nandi, carved from a single boulder and measuring over 15 feet high and 27 feet long, one of the largest of its kind in the world. The temple walls and ceilings are adorned with vibrant, intricate frescoes depicting scenes from mythology, their colors still vivid after centuries. Yet, it is the silent, gravity-defying pillar that captures the imagination most powerfully. It forces us to ask what blend of meticulous skill, deep devotion, and possibly even lost principles of balance allowed such a thing to be created. It stands not as a monument to power, but to a profound understanding of material and form, a wonder achieved not through movement, but through perfect, impossible stillness. The ground itself groaned under the weight of ambition. In the year 305 before the Common Era, during his relentless siege of Rhodes, the Macedonian general did not just bring an army, he brought a moving mountain of wood and iron. This was the taker of cities, a siege engine so colossal it redefined the scale of ancient warfare. Imagine a fortified tower, but one that stood 9 stories tall, mounted on 8 massive, ironclad wheels, each nearly 15 feet high. Its front was sheathed in thick iron plates to defend against fire and projectiles, and its many levels housed a small garrison of soldiers, along with an arsenal of catapults and ballistae that could rain destruction from a terrifying height. Inside, a broad internal staircase allowed troops to move efficiently between floors during an assault. Moving this behemoth, however, was a logistical nightmare of its own. Historical accounts suggest it weighed well over 150 tons. To even approach the walls of Rhodes, engineers first had to construct a wide, level road strong enough to bear its unimaginable load. Then, teams of hundreds of men, likely using complex systems of capstans and ropes, would have strained to inch the wooden giant forward, a slow, grinding advance meant to shatter morale as much as masonry. For a time, it seemed unstoppable, coming perilously close to the city walls. But the ever-resourceful devised a brilliant counter. Under cover of darkness, they dug trenches and channels, then flooded the ground directly in front of this path. The mammoth machine, its wheels sinking into the soft, wet earth, became hopelessly stuck, a paralyzed giant. His master weapon neutralized, was forced to abandon the siege and the where it stood. The ultimate fate of this ephemeral wonder is as fascinating as its construction. According to some later historians, the people of Rhodes, in a twist of poetic justice, stripped the abandoned tower of its valuable iron plates. This metal, they say, was then melted down and repurposed, possibly forming part of the outer skin for their new symbol of freedom and resilience, the great Colossus that would soon grace their harbor. There was a wonder built for a single, destructive purpose, and when that purpose failed, it was dismantled, its materials reborn into a monument of peace and devotion. It stands as a powerful reminder that not all lost wonders were temples or tombs. Some were terrifying machines of war, their glory as transient as the conflict they were built to win. This fleeting giant of destruction makes the enduring ambition of the next wonder all the more striking, for it was a structure designed not to conquer a city, but to conquer time itself. European explorers of the 19th century gazed upon the soaring stone walls and declared them impossible. Such grandeur, they insisted, could not be the work of African hands, attributing the ruins instead to mythical figures like the Queen of Sheba or distant Phoenician traders. This colonial fiction crumbled before the truth of the stones themselves. Great Zimbabwe, a sprawling metropolis of granite built between the 11th and 15th centuries, stands as an undeniable testament to the sophistication and autonomy of the Shona civilization. This was no outpost of a foreign empire, but the powerful heart of a vast African kingdom, a center of trade, politics, and profound spirituality. The site is a breathtaking complex of 3 main areas, each speaking to a different facet of power. On a high granite hill sits the oldest section, the Hill Complex, a natural fortress that likely served as a royal residence and a spiritual sanctuary. Below, in the valley, spreads the Great Enclosure, the most iconic structure. Its outer wall is a masterpiece of dry stone construction, an elliptical curtain of precisely cut granite blocks, fitted together without a speck of mortar, rising over 30 feet high in places. Inside this vast space stands the enigmatic conical tower, a solid structure whose purpose remains a subject of debate, perhaps a grain silo, a symbolic phallus representing fertility, or a monument to royal authority. The true genius lies in the building technique. Local granite was naturally exfoliated into slabs, then carefully shaped and stacked. The walls are not straight but curve gracefully, their stability coming from the meticulous placement of each stone, a technique refined over generations. This city thrived as the capital of a kingdom that controlled the lucrative trade routes between the African interior and ports on the Indian Ocean. Gold, ivory, and copper flowed through its markets, connecting it to a wider world that stretched as far as China and the Persian Gulf. Its decline around the 15th century is one of its lingering puzzles. Did a growing population outstrip local resources? Did shifts in global trade routes, or perhaps political fragmentation, cause its power to wane? The people did not vanish, they likely moved and established new centers of power, but the great stone capital was gradually abandoned. The scale of Great Zimbabwe forces us to ask a profound question about social organization. What kind of leadership, what shared vision and collective labor could coordinate the construction of a metropolis from stone over centuries? It stands not as a lonely ruin, but as a powerful reminder of the complex, innovative civilizations that flourished across the African continent, their stories written not in borrowed scripts, but in the enduring language of granite and earth. The last queen of Egypt ruled from a palace that now sleeps beneath the waves. Cleopatra, the seventh's legendary royal quarters were not in the heart of Alexandria, but on the small, exclusive island within the city's eastern harbor. This was a private sanctuary of immense power and luxury, a complex of palaces, temples, and villas set apart from the bustling metropolis, where the final acts of the Ptolemaic dynasty played out. Today, you would need scuba gear to walk its halls. The same geological forces that claimed the port city have also caused this island to sink, a gradual tectonic subsidence that lowered the land and allowed the Mediterranean to reclaim it entirely. For centuries, its location was pure speculation, a ghost in historical texts. Then, underwater archaeologist and his team, mapping the harbor floor, began to find staggering clues. Emerging from the silt were sphinxes guarding nothing, colossal statues of Ptolemaic kings and queens, elegant columns, and massive granite blocks that once formed grand foundations. These are not scattered artifacts from a shipwreck, but the remains of architecture, the very bones of the island itself. The most compelling finds include a beautiful red granite statue believed to be a priest of the goddess Isis, and a colossal head thought to represent Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, both lying where they fell. Marine archaeologists face a constant, silent battle here. The preserves some materials like stone, but it actively eats away at metals and organics. Their work is a meticulous dance of mapping, careful recovery, and conservation, trying to stabilize history before it dissolves. To see these silent, submerged courtyards is to witness a drowned kingdom, a physical metaphor for the end of an era. The sea did not just cover stones, it swallowed the final stage of pharaonic Egypt. As we look at a giant stone head resting peacefully on the sand, we are left to wonder what intimate treasures of the last pharaohs might still be buried nearby. A lost diadem, a personal seal, or perhaps the very chambers where history's most famous queen made her fateful decisions, all waiting in the blue twilight. From this sunken seat of power, we ascend from the sea floor to a wonder carved not by water, but into the very face of a cliff. A simple act of curiosity in 1992 revealed an entire world beneath the farmer's feet. Villagers in Zhejiang Province, China, decided to pump the water out of a series of small, deep ponds they had always known, expecting to find perhaps a few old fish. What the receding water unveiled instead was the entrance to a staggering, hand-carved cavern. This was not a natural cave. Its walls were sculpted with astonishing precision, covered in uniform chisel marks that ran in parallel arcs across every surface. Intrigued, they pumped out more ponds, and then more. In total, 24 of these colossal man-made grottos were discovered, a hidden underground city covering over 30,000 square meters, an area larger than 4 football fields. Each cavern is a monumental feat of engineering, with soaring ceilings supported by massive, evenly spaced pillars. intricate staircases descending into deeper chambers, and stone bridges spanning interior pools. The walls and ceilings are adorned with those same precise, angled markings, a kind of decorative fingerprint left by the ancient workers, a pattern so consistent it suggests a unified, organized project of immense scale. Yet here lies the core of the mystery. Despite their breathtaking size and obvious sophistication, there is not a single historical record, not one scroll, poem, or local legend that mentions the construction of the grottos. It is as if thousands of laborers carved out millions of cubic feet of soft sandstone and then collectively agreed to never speak of it again. The purpose of this underground labyrinth is a complete enigma. Was it a quarry, providing stone for some grand, lost city above? The pillars left behind argue against that, as they would have been removed if stone were the only goal. Could it have been a secret imperial tomb complex or a hidden ritual space for ceremonies unknown to history? The engineering alone is baffling. To carve such vast chambers in fragile sandstone without causing catastrophic collapse required an advanced, intuitive understanding of stress distribution and structural support. The builders shaped each pillar and arch not at random, but as integral parts of a calculated plan to keep the mountain from caving in. The scale of the labor is almost incomprehensible. Conservative estimates suggest that removing the rock would have taken 1,000 people working around the clock for 6 years, and that does not account for the meticulous finishing of every single wall. What could possibly justify such a monumental, secretive, and back-breaking effort? Was it born of necessity, paranoia, or devotion? The silent, echoing halls offer no answers, only the relentless sound of water dripping in the dark. They stand, or rather lie, as a testament to a vanished will, a project so grand it was meant to be forgotten, hidden not by jungle or sea, but by the simple, everyday water of a farmer's pond. This hidden world of stone makes the next wonder all the more striking, for it was a place designed not to be forgotten, but to be a beacon for all eternity, shining from the top of the known world. His death in 1227 triggered an act of secrecy so absolute it has held for nearly 8 centuries. When Khan, the founder of the Mongol Empire, passed away, his most loyal followers initiated a protocol of silence that became the stuff of dark legend. To ensure his final resting place would never be found, and thus never be desecrated, they enacted a series of ruthless measures. A river is said to have been temporarily diverted, its course flowing over the burial site to erase all trace of digging. Trees were then planted across the entire area, their roots weaving a living camouflage over the grave. The funeral procession itself is reported to have taken a deliberately twisting, obscure route back to the capital. Even more chilling are the accounts that the soldiers tasked with the burial then executed every slave who had dug the tomb, and were in turn executed by another unit, creating a chain of silence with no living witnesses. Whether every detail is historical fact or layered myth, the intent is crystal clear. The location of the world's greatest conqueror was to become history's most closely guarded secret. The likely region, based on his own recorded wishes and historical texts, is the sacred mountain in modern Mongolia, a place he reportedly loved and where he had once found shelter. This has not stopped the modern world from looking. Expeditions have employed satellite imagery to scan vast landscapes for unnatural patterns and ground-penetrating radar to peer beneath the soil without disturbing it. Historians meticulously comb through ancient texts for any overlooked clue. Yet all these technological efforts run into a profound cultural wall. For many Mongolians, particularly those who maintain traditional beliefs, the search is not an exciting archaeological puzzle, but a profound desecration. Disturbing the resting place of the great Khan is seen as an affront to spiritual peace and a violation of a sacred oath of silence made by their ancestors. This creates a powerful ethical dilemma, pitting the global hunger for historical discovery against deep-seated cultural respect and the wishes of a descendant community. The enduring power of this secret is its own kind of wonder. It is a void that has swallowed an entire physical legacy, a monument defined entirely by its absence. In an age where satellites map every inch of the globe, the fact that a location of such immense historical significance can remain hidden speaks to the formidable will of those long gone. It forces us to reflect: what is more powerful, the stone of a tomb or the idea that protects it? This search for a grave hidden by mortal command leads us next to wonders that are concealed not by human hands, but by the very fabric of belief itself. The landscape itself seems to dream of giants. Across the misty plateaus of central Laos, thousands of immense stone jars lie scattered in clusters, as if a race of titans had simply set down their cups and walked away. This is the Plain of Jars, a megalithic mystery from Southeast Asia's Iron Age. Carved from sandstone and granite, these massive vessels stand up to 10 feet tall and weigh several tons each, their open mouths forever turned toward the sky. For over 2,000 years, they have kept their secrets, silent sentinels of a culture whose name we do not even know. The most widely accepted theory, supported by archaeological finds of human remains and burial goods inside and around some jars, suggests they served as communal resting places. The deceased would be placed inside a jar, and after a period, the bones might be collected for a secondary burial elsewhere, a practice seen in other regional cultures. But other intriguing possibilities persist. Could they have been used for fermenting rice wine or storing rainwater for travelers along ancient trade routes? Each theory speaks to a different facet of life and belief, from honoring the departed to sustaining the living. The logistical challenge alone is a wonder. How did these prehistoric people, without the wheel or metal tools, quarry such enormous blocks, shape them with such rounded precision, and transport them miles across rugged terrain? The likely method involved heating the stone with fire, then cooling it rapidly with water to cause flaking, followed by endless hours of pecking and grinding with harder stone tools. Transport would have required immense coordinated labor, likely using log rollers and rope made from jungle vines, a monumental effort for a communal project. Studying this wonder, however, comes with a sobering, modern danger. During the Vietnam War, the region was heavily bombed, and millions of pieces of unexploded ordnance remain buried among the jars. Clearance teams work painstakingly to make the site safe, meaning every archaeological survey is also a humanitarian act. This hazardous context makes each discovery even more precious. What does this silent, scattered field tell us about the people who made it? They were clearly organized, capable of planning and executing projects that span generations. They held shared beliefs powerful enough to motivate the moving of mountains, or at least mountains of stone. They were connected, perhaps through trade or cultural exchange, to ideas across Southeast Asia. Yet they remain anonymous, their story told only through these hollow, enduring forms. To walk among the jars is to feel the presence of a community that defined itself not by towering walls or glittering treasure, but by these collective, open vessels, inviting the heavens and guarding the earth. It is a reminder that some of history's most profound questions are not asked in grand temples, but whispered by the wind through empty stone. The clear blue water off island held a secret until a local diver named was simply looking for a new spot to observe sharks in 1986. What he found instead, resting on the sea floor nearly 80 feet below the surface, stopped him cold. Rising from the sandy bottom was a massive formation of rock that looked nothing like the surrounding reef. It appeared to be a gigantic step structure, with sharp 90-degree angles, flat platforms, and what seemed to be wide staircases ascending toward where the surface would have been 10,000 years ago. This was the monument, and its discovery ignited a debate that continues to this day, a debate that asks a fundamental question: are we looking at the world's oldest known pyramid, or is it one of nature's most spectacular impersonations? The formations are undeniably striking. The main structure is a rectangular platform about 500 feet long and 130 feet wide, rising nearly 80 feet from the seabed. Its sides are lined with what appear to be perfectly straight, vertical terraces. There are two prominent pillars that stand close together, like twin megaliths. One feature looks eerily like a crude human face carved into the stone, while another resembles a massive turtle. There is even a straight, narrow channel that some argue looks like a processional road. For those who believe it is man-made, these features are the evidence. They point to the sheer number of right angles and flat planes, which are rare in natural sandstone formations, and suggest the presence of tool marks and what could be quarrying scars. Geologists, however, offer a powerful counter-argument. They explain that the rock here is sandstone, which naturally fractures along straight lines and flat plains due to tectonic stresses in the region. The same seismic activity that makes this area prone to earthquakes could have sheared the rock into these remarkably geometric shapes entirely through natural processes. The so-called carvings and staircases, they say, are simply the result of underwater erosion and the relentless work of currents over. They argue that while it looks designed, it is a masterpiece of geology, not human hands. But the mystery deepens when you consider the timeline. If it was built by human beings, it had to have been constructed on dry land, which means during the last ice age when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. That would place its construction at least 10,000 years ago, a time mainstream archaeology tells us was dominated by hunter-gatherers, not pyramid-building cultures. Proponents of the man-made theory see this as evidence of a lost chapter in human history, a sophisticated culture that flourished on this now submerged land bridge. Every dive to the site feels like a test of perception. You are confronted with shapes that so insistently whisper of design that it becomes difficult to accept they are random. Yet, the scientific principle of razor suggests the simpler natural explanation is more likely. So we are left in a tantalizing limbo, a place where wonder does not require a definitive answer. Perhaps the true magic of is that it exists at that perfect precipice between known history and boundless possibility, a silent, aquatic riddle that challenges not just what we know, but how we choose to see. This question of aligning our sight with ancient intention leads us directly to wonders that were undeniably built to capture the cosmos itself. They stretch for miles across the green fields of Brittany, a silent army frozen in time. The Carnac Stones are not a single monument, but a vast, sprawling complex of over 3,000 prehistoric standing stones, arranged in astonishingly straight, dense rows that march across the landscape. At sites like, and you walk not among scattered ruins, but through a meticulously ordered forest of granite, with some alignments containing nearly 1,000 stones each, placed with a precision that feels both mathematical and deeply mysterious. These megaliths were raised by Neolithic communities over 5,000 years ago, an era before written language, before metal tools, an era we can only understand through the silent language of the stones themselves. The sheer scale of the endeavor is the first wonder. Each stone, some weighing many tons, was transported and erected using only muscle, rope, and wooden levers. This was not the work of a single generation, but a communal project that likely spanned centuries, a sustained act of faith or necessity whose purpose was so vital it compelled an entire culture to move mountains, one rock at a time. But what vital purpose could that possibly have been? Archaeologists have proposed compelling theories that transform this stone army from a random collection into a possible ancient machine. One leading idea suggests the alignments functioned as a colossal astronomical observatory. Certain rows appear to point toward the rising sun at the summer and winter solstices, while other formations may have tracked the moon's complex cycle. In this view, the stones were permanent markers, a giant calendar carved into the earth to guide planting, harvesting, and ritual ceremonies tied to the heavens. Another fascinating theory posits they were a form of seismic detector. The region sits on active fault lines, and some researchers suggest the stones were placed on points of geological sensitivity, their arrangement perhaps meant to stabilize the earth spiritually or even to act as a warning system through subtle vibrations. For others, the stones clearly delineate a sacred boundary, separating the realm of the living from the realm of the ancestors or the gods, a permanent temple without a roof. Local folklore offers a more narrative explanation, a legend that says these are the remnants of a Roman legion, petrified by a Christian saint as they pursued him. This story, while fanciful, captures the awe the stones have inspired for their orderly ranks forever resembling an army on the march. To stand among them is to feel the weight of that communal effort. What shared belief, what unified vision could organize a society to undertake such a monumental, multi-generational task? The Carnac Stones do not whisper their secrets easily. They stand as a testament to a deep, prehistoric understanding of the landscape, not just as a place to live, but as a canvas for meaning, a clock connected to the cosmos, and a sacred map written in granite. This profound connection to the earth and sky finds a startling parallel in a wonder built not with communal labor, but by the focused will of a single, remarkable ruler. Its power was measured not in stone monuments, but in the flow of spices and the movement of ships. For over 600 years, from the 7th to the 13th centuries, the kingdom of dominated the most vital choke point in the ancient world, the Strait of Malacca. This was an empire of the sea, whose wealth and influence radiated from its control of the maritime spice route connecting China, India, and the Middle East. It was a major center of Buddhist scholarship, a place where the Chinese monk stopped for 6 months to study Sanskrit grammar on his long pilgrimage to India. Yet if you traveled to Palembang in Sumatra today, expecting to find the crumbled palaces and temple complexes of this once mighty power, you would be met with a profound absence. Where are its wonders? The answer lies in the very nature of its greatness. Its capital was almost certainly a vast, bustling city of wood and thatch, built on the banks and even on stilts over the river. In a tropical climate, wood rots, thatch dissolves, and earthen fortifications melt back into the mud. The empire built for commerce and connectivity, not for eternity in stone. Its grandeur was perishable. This is why it presents one of history's most fascinating paradoxes, an invisible superpower. For centuries, it was known only from scattered mentions in foreign chronicles, a ghost in the textual record. Then, in the modern era, fishermen and divers began pulling extraordinary objects from the muddy bed of the river. Their nets and hands brought up gold ceremonial rings intricately worked with mythical beasts, bronze Buddhist statues, glittering gems, and thousands of ancient coins from across the globe. These are not the foundations of a city, but its lost belongings, the scattered jewels that fell from its crown. Each artifact is a silent witness to the opulence that once floated upon these waters, hinting at a capital that must have been a dazzling spectacle of pavilions, bustling docks, and floating markets. The riverbed itself has become the archive. This discovery forces us to ask a humbling question about how we measure history. We are conditioned to look for the pyramids, the Colosseums, the Great Walls, the wonders built to defy time. But what about the empires that built in wood, whose greatness was in networks, knowledge, and the soft power of faith? What entire chapters of human achievement have vanished simply because they were constructed from materials that chose to return peacefully to the earth? Its legacy is a whisper of trade winds and sutras, a reminder that some of the most powerful wonders were never meant to be found by archaeologists, only felt in the currents of history they once commanded. The story begins with a single, unified language and a shared, towering ambition. In the biblical book of Genesis, humanity gathers on the plains of and decides to build a city with a tower so high its top will reach the heavens. This act of collective pride, of challenging the divine domain, provokes a divine response. To halt their progress, the story says, the people's language is confounded, scattering them across the earth in a babel of confusion. It is a powerful, enduring tale about the limits of human aspiration and the origins of our divisions. But where did this profound myth find its footing in reality? The answer lies in the magnificent, ruined heart of ancient Babylon. The real-world inspiration was almost certainly the house of the foundation of heaven and earth, a colossal ziggurat dedicated to the city's supreme god, Marduk. Historical accounts, including those from the Greek historian Herodotus, describe a massive stepped pyramid of baked brick, rising in 7 tiers to a temple at its summit, where priests performed rituals to bridge the gap between earth and sky. For centuries, this structure dominated the flat Mesopotamian plain, a literal stairway to the divine. Yet, by the time the biblical exiles from Judah saw it in the 6th century before the Common Era, it was likely in a state of ruin or disrepair, a crumbling monument to a foreign god. Its core was made of sun-dried mud brick, a material that erodes and melts back into the earth when not maintained. Over subsequent centuries, the local population, its baked brick facing for their own buildings, leaving behind little more than a vast, formless hill. This physical reality, a giant man-made mountain that had clearly fallen from its former glory, perfectly fertilized the imagination. The story of the Tower of Babel is a masterpiece of cultural memory. It transformed a real, ruined ziggurat, a symbol of Babylonian power and religious belief, into a universal metaphor. It took a specific place and made it a story for everyone, about the perils of overreach and the poignant mystery of why we speak in so many tongues. Why does this image of a tower reaching for heaven resonate so deeply across cultures and centuries? Perhaps because it speaks to a fundamental human tension, our drive to achieve the impossible, forever balanced against the forces, both natural and divine, that remind us of our place. From this legendary tower that sought to connect earth and heaven, we descend into a hidden, underground world built for a far more practical, yet equally ambitious, purpose. A man in 1963 was simply knocking down a wall in his basement in Cappadocia, Turkey, when his hammer broke through into empty space. Clearing away the rubble, he peered into a dark passageway that led not to another room, but into the depths of the earth itself. He had accidentally uncovered the entrance to an underground city of breathtaking scale and complexity. This was not a simple cave or a few hidden chambers. It was a vertical metropolis, carved from the soft volcanic rock known as tuff, descending approximately 60 meters deep, equivalent to an 18-story building buried upside down. The city was a self-contained world, with ventilation shafts that provided fresh air to even the lowest levels, ingenious wells that tapped into underground water sources, stables for livestock, storage rooms for grain and oil, wineries, communal kitchens, and even chapels with carved crosses on their walls. Archaeologists estimate that at its peak, could have sheltered up to 20,000 people, along with their animals and supplies, for months at a time. Its primary purpose was refuge. For centuries, from at least the early Byzantine era, this hidden labyrinth served as a sanctuary for communities, often early Christians, fleeing waves of persecution or violent raids sweeping across the region above. Life here was a trade, safety for sunlight. The engineering that made this possible was brilliant in its simplicity. The soft tuff was easy to carve with basic tools, but hardened on exposure to air, creating stable, durable living spaces. The most iconic security features were the massive, circular stone doors. These were millstone-like slabs that could be rolled across key passageways from the inside, sealing entire sections of the city from intruders. Small holes in the center allowed defenders to spear anyone trying to force their way in. Was not alone. It is part of a vast network of hundreds of underground settlements scattered throughout Cappadocia, some of which are believed to be connected by miles of tunnels, though many remain unexplored. This raises a profound question about the human spirit. What does it take for an entire community to willingly retreat from the sun, to choose a life of perpetual twilight for the sake of survival? They did not just hide, they built a civilization in reverse, carving not upward in pride, but downward in resilience. Every chapel, every air shaft, every rolling stone door speaks of a people who refused to vanish, who chose to preserve their way of life in the silent, patient dark. This hidden city stands as a monumental wonder born not from ambition, but from necessity, a testament to the lengths we will go to protect what we hold dear. Its light was a star fixed upon the earth, a beacon that guided sailors safely into the greatest port of the ancient world for over 1,600 years. The Pharos of Alexandria, standing at a staggering height estimated between 350 and 400 feet, was more than a lighthouse. It was the very symbol of the city's genius. Its three-tiered design, a square base, an octagonal middle, and a cylindrical top crowned by a statue, became the archetype for all lighthouses to come. At its summit, a giant polished bronze mirror, likely a parabolic reflector, would capture and project the light of a massive furnace, casting its beam dozens of miles out to sea, a technological marvel that felt like magic. Yet, for all its fame and detailed descriptions, the Pharos holds a tantalizing physical mystery. We know it stood, we know it functioned, but the precise appearance of its crowning pinnacle and statue is lost to us. A series of devastating earthquakes, beginning in the 10th century and culminating in a final collapse in the 14th century, chipped away at the giant until it was a ruin. Then, in the 15th century, the Sultan used the fallen stone blocks to construct his formidable citadel on the exact same site, effectively recycling the wonder into a fortress. This act of practical reuse, while preserving the location's strategic importance, forever obscured the original form of the upper levels, burying the final clues in new walls. So, how do we glimpse its true shape? Historians turn to two key sources. Ancient Roman coins minted in Alexandria often featured the lighthouse on their reverse, providing small but crucial schematics. These coins consistently show the three distinct tiers, and importantly, a statue at the top, though whether it depicted Zeus, Poseidon, or the guardian god of sailors is debated. These images are corroborated by the writings of Arab travelers who visited the structure when it was still partially standing and described its decaying grandeur. From these fragments, a picture emerges, yet crucial details remain in shadow. Was the statue one of a standing figure or a colossal seated god? How exactly was the mirror apparatus engineered? The stones that could answer these questions are now part of another monument, a silent testament to how even the most documented wonders can leave their finest details to the realm of educated guesswork. We are left with the ghost of a guiding light, its physical form dissolved into history, yet its symbolic brilliance undimmed. Where one wonder shone to ensure safe passage, another was constructed to mark a boundary of absolute peril, a warning carved in stone for any who dared approach. The arena that defined an empire borrowed its name from a forgotten giant. While the Colossus of Rhodes is legendary, Rome had its own monumental bronze titan, a 100-foot statue of Emperor Nero that once cast its shadow over the city. This was the Colossus of Nero, a breathtaking and politically charged wonder that stood near the site of what would become the Flavian Amphitheater, the very structure we now call the Colosseum, a name derived from its colossal neighbor. The statue's story is one of constant reinvention, reflecting the changing tides of Roman power and memory. After Nero's downfall and the erasure of his legacy, subsequent emperors could not bear to destroy such an impressive feat of engineering. Instead, they transformed it. The head was replaced, first with the features of the sun god Sol and later with those of Helios, effectively converting a monument to a despised emperor into a tribute to a celestial deity. Emperors like Hadrian even went so far as to move the entire statue, using teams of elephants, to a new position closer to the amphitheater, a logistical marvel in itself. Its ultimate fate, like so many bronze wonders, was likely dissolution. Historians believe it was probably dismantled and melted down for its valuable metal sometime in the early Middle Ages, its bronze recycled into coins, tools, or church bells. The existence of such a statue in the Roman Forum raises profound questions about power and perception. Was this a legitimate piece of commemorative art, celebrating the leader of the world's greatest empire? Or was it the ultimate expression of megalomania, a permanent metal god of the self imposed upon the city's skyline? In a society where imperial cults blurred the line between man and deity, the Colossus served as a blunt instrument of propaganda, a constant, looming reminder of where ultimate authority resided. Its loss reminds us that the heart of ancient Rome was not a static museum of marble, but a dynamic, crowded gallery of wonders, many of which, from gilded statues to triumphal arches plated in bronze, have vanished completely, leaving only their echoes in the names of places and the pages of history. The reconstructed Ishtar Gate in Berlin is a breathtaking sight, a wall of shimmering cobalt blue adorned with golden dragons and bulls. Yet this magnificent display is a fragment, a brilliant piece of a much larger puzzle that remains scattered and lost. In ancient Babylon, this was not a monument, but the grand entrance to a sacred corridor known as the Processional Way. For nearly half a mile, this raised brick road, lined with walls over 50 feet high and decorated with over 120 glazed reliefs of lions, stretched all the way to the city's great ziggurat. It was a tunnel of blue and gold, designed for the New Year's festival when statues of the gods would be paraded through it, surrounded by a sea of color and ceremony. The gate itself, commissioned by King Nebuchadnezzar II, was a technical marvel, its bricks fired with a precise glaze to achieve that legendary lapis lazuli blue, a color meant to evoke the divine heavens. Today, we have recovered only a fraction of this glory. While the gate's main facade was excavated in the early 20th century and painstakingly rebuilt in Berlin, the vast majority of the processional way's bricks and countless other reliefs were never recovered. Many were likely reused as building material over the centuries, melted back into the landscape of modern Iraq. Others may still lie buried, awaiting discovery. This situation places the Ishtar Gate at the heart of a modern and deeply complex conversation about cultural heritage. Who does a wonder belong to, the land where it was created, or the museum that preserved and reconstructed it? The gate in Berlin is accessible to millions, a testament to ancient artistry saved from potential loss, yet its physical removal means the original site in Babylon feels incomplete, a ghost of its former self. This is the paradox of many recovered wonders. They are both found and forever lost. We possess their pieces, we marvel at their reassembled forms, but their full context, their complete sensory impact in the place they were meant to be, is a void we can never truly fill. It is a reminder that our understanding of the past is often a beautiful mosaic, pieced together from the fragments that time and history have chosen to spare. Herodotus recorded a catastrophe that became a permanent warning. The Greek historian wrote of a Persian army, 50,000 strong, dispatched by King Cambyses II in 525 before the Common Era with a single sacrilegious order, to destroy the oracle of Amun at the distant Oasis. According to the tale, this formidable force marched into the vast western desert of Egypt and simply never emerged. A monstrous sandstorm, sent by the gods in punishment or simply a ferocious act of nature, rose up and swallowed the entire legion whole, burying men, horses, and weapons under a shifting sea of dunes. For centuries, this story of the lost army of Cambyses was viewed as one of more dramatic fables, a moral lesson about hubris against the divine. Yet, the haunting possibility that it held a kernel of truth has never fully faded. The search for this vanished wonder, a tragic event frozen in time, has drawn explorers into one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, the Great Sand Sea of Egypt. Modern expeditions, equipped with satellite imagery and metal detectors, have combed the suspected routes. Their finds are tantalizing fragments, whispers from the sand. They have uncovered ancient bronze weapon tips, fragments of Achaemenid-era metalwork, and even scattered human remains emerging from the dunes. Each discovery sends a ripple of excitement, a potential clue. But the conclusive evidence, the concentrated massive burial site of an entire army, has remained elusive. This absence fuels competing theories. Perhaps the storm was not a single apocalyptic event, but a series of debilitating blasts that scattered and disoriented the force, leading to death by thirst and exposure over a wide area, their remains gradually covered over. Other scholars suggest a less supernatural but equally decisive end, that the army, lost and desperate, was attacked and defeated by desert tribes, its survivors assimilated into local populations, their story dissolving into legend. To contemplate this mystery is to confront a profoundly human scale of awe. What would it have been like in those final moments, to see the horizon dissolve into a roaring, darkening wall of sand, to feel the world itself turning against you? The story of the lost army transcends a simple historical puzzle. It becomes a meditation on the immense, indifferent power of the natural world against even the most organized human force. It reminds us that some wonders are not buildings or statues, but moments of profound transition, where history itself seems to be inhaled by the earth. The sea floor near southern Greece holds a perfectly preserved neighborhood from the Bronze Age. In 1967, oceanographer Nicholas made an astonishing discovery just off the coast of the Peloponnese, the sunken ruins of an entire town, now known as. Dating back an incredible 5,000 years, this is the oldest known submerged city in the world, a complete urban plan frozen in time beneath the Mediterranean. What makes so extraordinary is not just its age, but its stunning state of preservation. Under the clear water, archaeologists have mapped a complete street grid, the foundations of houses, courtyards, religious buildings, and even rock-cut tombs, all laid out with a clear, intentional design. This was not a haphazard settlement, but a planned community from an era we often think of as primitive. The town thrived during the time of the Minoan and early Mycenaean civilizations, likely as a bustling port for trade in textiles and olive oil. Its end came not from war or abandonment, but from the shifting earth. Sometime around 1,000 years before the Common Era, seismic activity, perhaps a series of earthquakes, caused the land to subside, and the sea slowly, irrevocably, claimed the streets and homes. Its submersion, while a tragedy for its inhabitants, created a unique time capsule. Protected from later construction, farming, and erosion, the town's layout remains exactly as it was left. Underwater surveys using sonar and photogrammetry have revealed a sophisticated understanding of urban planning, with main roads, alleys, and buildings arranged to accommodate both public life and private industry. There is evidence of a complex water management system and a central administrative area, suggesting an organized society with social hierarchy. The silent, sunken streets offer profound lessons that reach far beyond archaeology. This town forces us to reconsider ancient patterns of coastal living. How many other early cities were built on shores that are now underwater, lost to gradual sea level rise or sudden geological events? It provides a tangible, poignant record of environmental change, a reminder that the coastline has always been a dynamic, sometimes perilous, place to build a future. To swim through these quiet ruins is to hover over a moment suspended. What would you have heard in these streets 5 ago? The clatter of pottery from an open courtyard, the calls of merchants near the waterfront, the laughter of children in a doorway now open only to fish, is not a monument of kings, but a neighborhood of ordinary life, a community preserved in its entirety by the very sea that took it. This intact snapshot of daily existence stands in stark contrast to wonders that met a far more violent and deliberate end. Its walls were not stone, but sunlight. The Amber Room was a chamber where 6 tons of honey-colored Baltic amber, carved into intricate mosaics and panels, were backed with gold leaf and set between tall, gilded mirrors and Florentine stone mosaics. A gift from Prussia to Russia in the early 18th century, it was later expanded by Tsarist craftsmen into a space measuring over 180 square feet, a glowing, jewel box interior within the palace near St. Petersburg. Visitors described it as a space where candlelight infinitely in the mirrors, setting the amber ablaze with a warm, living radiance, earning it the nickname the 8th wonder of the world. This opulent treasure, however, was destined for a dark and mysterious journey. As Nazi forces advanced into the Soviet Union during World War II, Curators attempted to hide the room by covering the panels with wallpaper, but the fragile amber could not be dismantled quickly enough. In 1941, German troops discovered it, carefully packed the entire contents into 27 crates, and shipped them to Kassel in East Prussia, where they were put on display. Then, as the war turned, the room vanished. In 1944, with Allied bombing raids intensifying, the panels were reportedly packed away again. After that, the trail goes cold. The hunt for the lost amber room became one of the 20th century's greatest treasure chases. Post-war investigators, soldiers, and enthusiasts have scoured Europe, searching flooded salt mines in Germany, checking the holds of sunken ships in the Baltic Sea, and exploring rumored bunker complexes. Some believe it was destroyed in the Kassel fire during the city's capture. Others are convinced it was hidden in a secret repository that was later sealed or forgotten, perhaps deep within a mine shaft or behind a false wall in an old manor. The mystery was so compelling that, after decades of fruitless searching, Russian craftsmen embarked on a monumental act of recreation. Using original techniques, old black and white photographs, and one surviving color detail, they spent 24 years and millions of dollars to rebuild the amber room from scratch, completing it in 2003 for the 300th anniversary of St. Petersburg. The reconstructed chamber now gleams as it once did, a breathtaking tribute. Yet the original panels, worth an almost mythical sum today, have never been found. This story speaks to a different kind of loss, not of a city or a temple, but of a singular masterpiece of human artistry. Its fate asks a haunting question: is a wonder truly gone if its precise physical form is lost? But its legend inspires an even greater act of dedication to bring it back. The Amber Room represents the ultimate physical treasure hunt, a pursuit of glittering, tangible beauty. It prepares us to consider wonders that are not objects at all, but living, breathing traditions that face a far more subtle kind of vanishing. Their devotion was measured in vertical feet, a faith that climbed beyond the reach of the world. Clinging to the faces of impossible cliffs in the Himalayas, monasteries like in Bhutan, known as Tiger's Nest, seem to defy not just gravity, but the very idea of what a building can be. These are not structures placed upon a mountain, but ones that appear to have grown from it, wooden balconies and whitewashed walls emerging from the rock itself like blossoms from stone. The motivation behind such a precarious choice of location was profoundly spiritual. For Buddhist monks and hermits, seeking absolute isolation was a direct path to enlightenment. By removing themselves from the distractions and comforts of the valley floor, they aimed to be closer to the heavens, both literally and metaphorically. The sheer physical effort required to reach such a place was itself a form of meditation, a purification through exertion. But how did they build there? The engineering was a breathtaking blend of ingenuity and fearless labor. Builders would descend from the clifftops on ropes, chiseling narrow ledges and cavities into the rock. They drove massive wooden beams, often from resilient local trees, directly into pre-drilled holes in the cliff face, creating a skeletal framework upon which the rest of the structure could be assembled. Materials were hauled up from below using intricate systems of rope pulleys, or carried on the backs of builders navigating treacherous, narrow paths. Every beam, every stone, was lifted by human strength and determination, a communal project that could take generations to complete. Life in these aerial retreats was a study in focused simplicity. Monks would rise before dawn for meditation in halls that overlooked vast, cloud-filled valleys. Their daily routines of prayer, study, and modest chores were conducted with the constant, humbling awareness of the abyss outside their windows. Supplies came from arduous climbs or were lifted in baskets, making every resource precious. The architecture itself enforced a mindful existence, where a single misstep could have eternal consequences. Today, many of these monasteries, like Tiger's Nest, are still active spiritual centers, though they are often connected by modern staircases for pilgrims and tourists. This accessibility, while preserving the physical structure, inevitably changes the nature of the solitude they were built to provide. They represent a fading tradition of extreme hermitage, a way of life where the boundary between the earthly struggle and divine pursuit was as thin as the monastery wall. To stand on one of those wooden balconies is to feel a profound question in the wind. What inner calling is powerful enough to make a person not just visit, but choose to live on the edge of nothing, finding peace in perpetual exposure? These clinging wonders are more than buildings. They are manifestos in wood and stone, declarations that the human spirit will go to any length, scale any height, to find its connection to something greater. The gleaming skin of ancient cities was not just marble, but polished bronze. For every serene stone face we see in museums today, there were once countless dynamic, lifelike figures cast in metal, their surfaces catching the sun with a warm, living glow. The Greeks and later the Romans perfected the art of large-scale bronze sculpture, achieving a level of realism that made their gods, heroes, and athletes seem ready to breathe. Their secret was the lost wax method, a sophisticated and demanding process. An artist would first create a clay core in the rough shape of the intended statue. This core was then covered in a layer of beeswax, meticulously sculpted into every fine detail, every muscle and fold of drapery. This wax model was encased in another layer of clay to create a mold. The entire assembly was then heated, melting the wax out through special channels and leaving a hollow space between the core and the mold. Finally, molten bronze was poured into that space, filling every crevice the wax had occupied. Once cooled, the outer mold and inner core were broken away, revealing the bronze statue within, ready for finishing, polishing, and often the addition of glass eyes and copper lips. This process allowed for breathtaking subtlety and dynamism, poses that would be impossible in monolithic stone. We know the names of the masters, Praxiteles, and we have glowing descriptions of their work. Or spear bearer was not a stiff marble pillar, but a balanced, walking figure in bronze, a treatise on perfect proportion made physical. Was famed for his colossal statue of Zeus a towering god that must have inspired awe. Yet, if you search for these originals, you will find only empty pedestals. The great tragedy is that nearly all of these masterpieces are gone, not due to the slow erosion of time, but to deliberate, calculated recycling. Bronze was simply too valuable. In later centuries, during wars, economic crises, or religious shifts, these irreplaceable works of art were viewed not as cultural treasures, but as convenient stockpiles of raw material. They were melted down by the thousands to make coins, cannons, church bells, or new sculptures for new rulers. What survives for us to study are primarily the Roman marble copies, often competent but lacking the vibrant, precise energy of the bronze originals. They are echoes of echoes. This wholesale loss fundamentally skews our view of classical art. We see it as static, white, and calm, when in its own time it was vibrant, metallic, and astonishingly realistic. Imagine walking through an Athenian agora or a Roman forum, where every niche and square held figures that shone like golden flesh, their eyes seeming to follow you. That experience, that particular glory of the ancient world, is a vanished sense. It is a cultural disappearance on a staggering scale, a reminder that the value we place on art is a fragile construct, forever vulnerable to the pressing needs of the moment. This loss of tangible beauty makes the survival of intangible knowledge, of ideas preserved against all odds, all the more remarkable. Its name became the word for any grand tomb, but its own stones were scattered to the winds. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus was built as an eternal house for a regional ruler named, and his wife Artemisia in the 4th century before the Common Era. It was a breathtaking fusion of architectural styles, a massive rectangular base topped by a colonnade of 36 columns, crowned with a stepped pyramid, and all surmounted by a monumental statue of a chariot. For 16 centuries, it stood as a landmark of personal glory, one of the ancient world's definitive 7 wonders. Its end, however, was not a single cataclysm, but a slow unraveling. A series of medieval earthquakes sent the chariot and pyramid tumbling, leaving the core structure a magnificent ruin. Then, in the 15th century, the Knights of St. John arrived, needing sturdy stone to fortify their castle against the Ottoman Empire. They found a ready-made quarry in the mausoleum's remains. For years, they systematically dismantled the wonder, prying its beautiful marble blocks and friezes from the earth to build walls and bastions. They even burned the remaining sculptural fragments in kilns to make lime for mortar. The monument, built for eternal memory, was literally baked into the defenses of a crusader fortress. The final diaspora of its art was carried out by collectors centuries later. In the 1800s, pieces of the surviving frieze, including magnificent scenes of a battle between Greeks and Amazons, were removed by British diplomats and sent to the British Museum, where they reside today. Other fragments found their way to collections across Europe, so we are left with a profound irony. The mausoleum is both everywhere and nowhere. Its name is universal, its artistic influence echoes in countless neoclassical buildings, and its pieces are preserved under museum lights on another continent. Yet the structure itself, the specific arrangement of those pieces in the coastal city of, is utterly gone, its site an empty footprint. It forces us to ask, what is the true life of a wonder? Is it in its physical unity on a specific patch of earth, or in the fragmented legacy of its art and the very language it bequeaths to us? This story of a tomb taken apart stone by stone makes the next wonder all the more poignant, for it was not a static monument, but a living, breathing, and growing testament to faith that chose to retreat from the world. A cathedral did not need walls if it had a canopy of ancient oak. Across the ancient world, from the misty highlands of Celtic Europe to the sun-dappled shores of the Mediterranean, some of the most profound sacred spaces were not built by human hands, but grown. These were the sacred groves, forests dedicated to deities, protected by such powerful taboo that to break a branch within them was considered a grave offense against the divine. The Druids of Gaul and Britain held their most important ceremonies in clearings encircled by towering trees. In Italy, the Grove of Diana at Lake was so revered that its priest, the Rex, gained his position by slaying his predecessor in a grim, perpetual challenge. These were open-air temples where the divine was felt in the rustle of leaves, the scent of damp earth, and the filtered light that fell like a blessing. Their power came from their living, untamed nature, a direct line to a world beyond human control. To enter a sacred grove was to step into a buffer zone between the community and the raw, numinous power of the gods. This made them ecological sanctuaries as much as spiritual ones, preserving old-growth forests that might otherwise have been cleared for farmland or timber. Their loss was a quiet, profound erasure. With the spread of Christianity across Europe, these pagan sanctuaries were systematically targeted. Missionaries like Saint famously felled the sacred oak of Thor to demonstrate the superiority of the new faith. The groves were cut down, not just to remove a rival's spiritual focus, but often to use the valuable timber for church construction or to make way for cultivated fields. Unlike stone temples, which leave ruins, a sacred grove leaves almost nothing behind when it is gone. Its trace survives only in whispered place names, in the pages of Roman historians who wrote of them with a mix of awe and suspicion, and in folk memories of certain woods being haunted or uncanny. What vanished with those trees was an entire way of knowing. What intricate herbal lore, what prayers tied to the turning of specific leaves or the blooming of certain flowers, died with the last grove keeper. These spaces were not just for solitary priests, they were the heart of community bonding, where seasonal festivals tied the people to the cycles of the earth itself. Their clearing represents a double loss, of both deep ecological wisdom and a form of spirituality that saw the divine as immanent in the living world. We are left to wonder, in our search for lost wonders of stone and metal, have we overlooked the most fragile wonders of all, those that were alive, breathing, and utterly irreplaceable? The early 20th century delivered a wonder from the ground up, but its true form remains a beautiful argument. When Sir Arthur began excavating a hill on Crete in 1900, he believed he had found the legendary palace of King Minos, the heart of the Minoan civilization. What he uncovered was a sprawling, complex ruin without parallel, a Bronze Age capital with vivid frescoes of leaping dolphins and elegant court ladies, advanced plumbing, and a layout so confusing it seemed to breathe life into the ancient myth of the labyrinth and the Minotaur. Confronted with crumbling walls and fragile foundations, made a monumental decision. He would not just excavate, he would reconstruct. Using reinforced concrete, he rebuilt entire sections of the palace, from the grand staircases of the Grand Staircase to the iconic red columns that taper downward, creating the instantly recognizable silhouette of Knossos we know today. His goal was noble: to give the public and scholars a tangible sense of the palace's original grandeur, to make the past walkable. The result is undeniably compelling. Visitors can wander through the throne room, stand in the central court, and gaze at reproductions of the frescoes feeling immersed in a vibrant, ancient world. This very immersion, however, lies at the heart of a modern dilemma. For many archaeologists, did not just restore a wonder, he reimagined it. His concrete work is now permanently fused with the original stone. His interpretations of how rooms functioned or how frescoes were arranged were educated guesses, but guesses nonetheless, frozen in permanent material. In his enthusiasm, he may have created a magnificent hybrid, a 20th-century vision of a Bronze Age palace built directly atop the authentic ruins. This forces a difficult question upon all of us who love history. Where should the line be drawn between preserving a ruin as found and reconstructing it to be understood? Is a site more authentic as a collection of low, confusing stone foundations, or as a coherent, evocative experience, even if part of that experience is modern invention? The Palace of Knossos stands as a powerful, beautiful contradiction. It is a wonder that is both profoundly found and, in a way, forever lost, its original truth now sheltered, and perhaps obscured, by the very hands that sought to rescue it. This tension between discovery and invention prepares us for wonders whose entire existence is measured not in stone, but in the careful, silent cultivation of knowledge itself. The scientific method sometimes builds its bridges from the thinnest of threads. In the 1860s, a British zoologist named Philip Sclater was puzzled by a very specific fossil record. He noted that the remains of lemurs, those wide-eyed primates, were found in Madagascar and India, but nowhere in between. To explain this curious distribution, he proposed a bold geological solution: a vast, now sunken continent stretching across the Indian Ocean, which he named. This was not a fanciful myth, but a legitimate scientific hypothesis of its time, an attempt to use the best available knowledge to solve a genuine puzzle of nature. It was a land bridge made of logic, designed to carry the weight of lemurs from one shore to another. Yet, this dry, academic theory was about to be swept up by a powerful cultural current. Shortly after Sclater published his idea, it was adopted and utterly transformed by the Theosophical Society, a spiritual movement founded by Helena. In their writings was no longer just a sunken zoological pathway. It became Mu, a lost paradise, the home of a third root race of humanity, a civilization of spiritually advanced, hermaphroditic giants who communicated through telepathy and possessed mysterious technologies. The scientific land bridge had been rebuilt into a utopian fantasy, a sunken Eden that explained everything from ancient myths to psychic phenomena. This transition is a fascinating case study in how ideas evolve. A theory born from rational inquiry was grafted onto a deep, pre-existing human longing for a golden age, a perfect society we had somehow lost. The real explanation, of course, arrived a century later with the solid, grinding logic of plate tectonics. We now understand that Madagascar and India were indeed once connected, not by a lost continent, but as part of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana, which slowly drifted apart over millions of years, carrying their unique wildlife, including the ancestors of lemurs, to their separate destinies. The science was settled, yet the myth did not die. persists a spectral presence in pseudo-archaeological documentaries, fantasy literature, and New Age belief, a symbol that floats free of its disproven origins. Why does this happen? Perhaps because the concept of a sunken, advanced world speaks to something profound within us, a nostalgia for a wisdom we imagine we once possessed, a cataclysm that explains our current imperfections. The lost continent of is a different kind of wonder, one constructed entirely from thought. A phantom that emerged from a fossil, was clothed in mystical narrative, and now lives on in the imagination, long after the rock-solid truth of plate tectonics sent the original hypothesis to the ocean floor of history. From a phantom continent built of theory, we turn to a masterpiece drawn on the very skin of the planet. The desert in Peru is a vast, silent canvas of beige and rust-red stone, a plateau so arid it preserves designs for. Scratched into this stony earth are hundreds of colossal figures, a gallery of giants only the sky can read. There are perfectly straight lines that run for miles, razor-sharp triangles and trapezoids, and intricate depictions of a hummingbird with a beak like a spear, a spider with one leg elegantly coiled, a monkey with a spiraling tail. These were created by the culture, beginning around 500 years before the Common Era, using a deceptively simple technique. They carefully removed the top layer of dark, sun-baked stones, exposing the lighter, sandy soil beneath. This created a stark, lasting contrast, a line drawn not with pigment, but with shadow and light. The precision is staggering. The shapes maintain their perfect proportions across hundreds of feet, a feat of engineering and geometry executed without the ability to see the final form from the ground. This is the core of their enduring mystery. Why would a people create art they could never fully behold? The most famous theory, proposed by researcher Maria, who dedicated her life to their study, suggests they were a giant astronomical calendar. Certain lines may point to the rising or setting sun at solstices, while the animal figures could represent constellations important to the worldview. Others see them as sacred pathways, walked during rituals to invoke deities, perhaps related to water, the most precious resource in that parched landscape. The hummingbird, spider, and monkey are all creatures associated with rain or fertility in Andean mythology, possibly serving as prayers etched into the earth itself. Some more speculative ideas even propose they were messages or landing markers for celestial beings, though this moves firmly into the realm of modern myth. Their modern discovery is a story of changed perspective. For centuries, people walked among them, seeing only strange grooves in the desert floor. It was not until the advent of commercial aviation in the 1920s and 30s that passengers looking out their windows saw the full, breathtaking pictures for the first time. The true scale and artistry of the lines was a gift of altitude. Today, these fragile wonders face very grounded threats. Illegal mining, urban encroachment, and even careless foot traffic from tourists can scar the delicate dark stone layer, erasing lines that have survived for 2,000 years. Preservation is a constant battle against both human activity and the occasional natural flood from the rare desert rain. To stand at the edge of these lines is to feel a profound question about human intention. What kind of societal faith and coordination was required to organize the creation of such massive, unseen art? It speaks of a shared belief so powerful that the labor itself was an act of devotion. The result, a testament meant not for their own eyes, but for the gods, the cosmos, or the generations far in the future who would finally gain the perspective to see them. They transformed their entire landscape into a sacred diagram, a code written in earth and stone. This act of drawing meaning onto the land finds a deeper, more intimate parallel in wonders that were not drawn upon the earth, but carefully placed within it, hidden in darkness to await a future they could scarcely imagine. Rome's true population was not counted among the living, but rested in the dark. Beneath the bustling streets of the ancient capital lies another city entirely, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers that once stretched for hundreds of miles, housing the remains of millions. This is the lost scale of the Roman catacombs, a wonder defined not by what we see, but by what has vanished from memory. While sections like and San Callisto are open to visitors today, offering a glimpse into this subterranean world, they represent only a fraction of the original network. Over centuries, as Rome's fortunes changed, countless passages were sealed up, forgotten, or quietly reused for other purposes, their maps dissolving into time. Entire corridors, once filled with the quiet presence of generations, became disconnected from the known entrances, their locations fading from record. This means that beneath modern neighborhoods and parks, there likely exist whole wings of this city of the dead, still holding their silent communities, waiting in undisturbed darkness. Walking through the accessible sections today is an experience that engages more than sight. The air is cool and still, carrying a faint, ancient scent of earth and stone. The walls are lined with rectangular niches, stacked from floor to ceiling like a library of lives. In these narrow, low-ceilinged passages, you are surrounded not by grand monuments, but by simple, humble memorials. What makes these catacombs a priceless historical record is the art and words left behind by a community that was often marginalized in the world above. Early Christians, who were frequently barred from traditional burial grounds, created these spaces. They decorated the soft volcanic rock with delicate frescoes and carvings, using symbols that spoke of hope and faith. You might see a simple fish, an anchor, or the figure of a shepherd carrying a lamb, each a coded message of belief and resilience. Inscriptions in Greek and Latin offer personal glimpses, a name, a prayer, a term of endearment for a lost child. This is not the official history of emperors and senators, but the intimate, heartfelt story of ordinary people navigating life, loss, and belief. The catacombs formed a mirror image of the city above, a parallel Rome built for eternity rather than commerce. Just as the surface had its neighborhoods and main thoroughfares, the underground network had its own major arteries and quieter, family-owned chambers. This hidden city operated with its own logic, its growth dictated by community need and the slow, steady passage of time. Its eventual fragmentation and partial loss represent more than just missing tunnels. They represent a gap in our understanding of Rome's demographic heart. The catacombs hold the physical record of the common citizen, the immigrant, the merchant, and the slave, individuals whose stories were rarely written into grand histories. When a section was sealed and forgotten, it was not just a corridor that disappeared, but a unique chapter in the story of human experience. To stand in the quiet of tunnels is to feel the weight of that collective memory, and to wonder what other chapters of that story still lie in the dark, just beyond the next sealed wall, preserving their secrets in the cool, patient earth. Aeschylus is credited with perhaps 90 plays, but we can only read 7. Sophocles wrote around 120, yet again, only 7 complete works survive. This is the silent catastrophe of classical drama, a library of human emotion and thought that has vanished almost entirely. In 5th century Athens, the theater was not a quiet pastime, but the pulsating heart of civic and spiritual life. During the great festival, the entire city would gather in the open-air theater, watching as competing playwrights presented trilogies of tragedies followed by a raucous satyr play. These were communal rituals, funded by wealthy citizens, where the most profound questions of justice, fate, and the gods were wrestled with in poetic verse before thousands of fellow citizens. The loss of these works was not a single event, but a slow, relentless process of erosion. The original scripts were recorded on papyrus scrolls, a fragile material that decays quickly in all but the driest climates. As the centuries turned, the survival of any text depended on it being and by hand onto new parchment. Monastic scribes in the Middle Ages, working with limited resources, made deliberate choices. They prioritized philosophical and historical texts, and the plays that were often those deemed most useful for teaching grammar or rhetoric. Countless other plays, perhaps seen as too pagan or simply less popular, were left to molder away in forgotten libraries, where fire, moisture, or insects finished the job. The scale of this cultural black hole is almost unimaginable. We have only titles and fragments to hint at what was lost. Imagine Aeschylus's satyr play, The Capture of the Trojan Horse, a comedic and likely bawdy counterpart to his tragic. What hilarious, insightful take on the famous myth did he present? Or consider the lost plays of Euripides that explored even more radical ideas than his surviving works. Each lost title represents a unique lens on the ancient world, a story, an argument, a moment of laughter or terror that shaped an audience and then disappeared from the human record. This forces a deeply personal reflection. If you could recover just one of those vanished scrolls from the silent archives of history, which lost play would you choose to bring back to the stage? The lost Library of Drama reminds us with poignant clarity that ideas, for all their power, are as fragile as papyrus and as vulnerable to the passing of time as any temple made of stone. The North Sea floor is a library of mud and memory. For centuries, fishermen trawling its waters have hauled up strange, heavy objects tangled in their nets, not fish, but the bones of woolly mammoths, the antlers of giant elk, and curiously shaped flint tools that clearly never belonged to the sea. These artifacts are pages torn from a lost world, a sunken continent of Europe called. During the last ice age, when glaciers locked up vast amounts of water, sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. What is now the stormy North Sea was instead a vast, low-lying plain of rolling hills, meandering rivers, lush forests, and sprawling marshes. This was not a barren bridge, but a rich, fertile heartland, teeming with life and home to communities of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers for thousands of years. They followed herds of reindeer, fished in its rivers, and gathered nuts in its dense woodlands, living in a landscape that connected Britain seamlessly to what we now call Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. Their world was defined not by coastlines, but by interior horizons. Then, the climate shifted. As the great ice sheets melted at the end of the Ice Age, the seas began their slow, relentless rise. For generations, the people would have witnessed a creeping change, the gradual encroachment into marshes, the slow drowning of familiar forests, the forced migration of game animals, and the steady shrinking of their usable territory. Communities would have retreated to ever higher ground, their oral histories filling with stories of lost hunting grounds and ancestral homes consumed by the water. The final act may have been swift and catastrophic. Geological evidence suggests that around 6,100 years before the Common Era, a massive underwater landslide off the coast of Norway, known as the Slide, triggered a colossal tsunami that raced across the remaining low-lying plains. A wall of water, perhaps dozens of feet high, would have swept across the final inhabited islands and marshes, delivering a devastating blow to any remaining settlements and sealing the fate of this entire landscape. The wonder of is not a single structure, but an entire country that vanished beneath the waves. Its loss reshaped the map of Europe, transforming Britain from a peninsula into an island and forever altering human migration and cultural development in the region. The tools and bones brought up by nets are haunting clues, but they only hint at the full story. What sacred sites, what campsites rich with artifacts, what entire chapters of early human adaptation now lie preserved in the silty darkness. The slow drowning of forces, a profound reflection on resilience. What songs, what survival sagas, were carried by the last people to walk its forests, as they gathered their families and belongings and moved toward the new, unfamiliar coasts, watching their old world disappear forever behind them. This lost landscape is a wonder of paleogeography, a reminder that the ground beneath our feet and the sea that borders it hold stories far older than any city or temple. The shifting dunes of the empty quarter held a warning for generations. Bedouin storytellers spoke of a place called a city of towering pillars and unimaginable wealth, whose people grew so arrogant and corrupt that the desert itself opened up and swallowed them whole as divine punishment. This legend, the Atlantis of the Sands, was long dismissed by scholars as a poetic mirage, a moral fable with no basis in stone. Yet the whispers persisted, finding an echo in a much older text, which mentions an ancient tribe, the people of Ad, who lived in a place called of the Pillars, a city of great stature built in a valley, who were also lost for their transgressions. For centuries, these two names, and floated in the realm of myth, tied to the same tantalizing idea of a civilization erased by the sands. The key to finding it, however, lay not in following old caravan routes on foot, but in looking down from the void. In the 1990s, a team led by explorer Nicholas and archaeologist employed a new kind of vision. They analyzed radar images from the space shuttle, which could penetrate the dry surface of southern Oman, looking for ancient paths invisible to the human eye. The satellite maps revealed something extraordinary, a faint web of lines converging on a single point in the desert, the fossilized tracks of countless camel caravans. Following these ghost roads to their nexus, the team arrived at a site called. There, they found not a city standing, but one that had fallen in. The ruins were clustered around the rim of a massive limestone sinkhole, a natural cavern whose roof had collapsed, dragging much of the settlement into the depths. The evidence on the ground told a story of opulence and abrupt disaster. They uncovered the foundations of an octagonal fortress with towers at each point, walls that once stood nearly 30 feet high. Inside, they found shards of Roman pottery, evidence of trade with the far-off Mediterranean world, and coins from across the ancient Near East. Most telling were the mounds of frankincense resin ash, the residue of the very commodity that built this empire. Was not a mythical city of sin, but a critical, real-world hub on the frankincense trail, a trade route so lucrative it was worth crossing hundreds of miles of the world's most hostile desert. The city's wealth was literally carved from the sap of scraggly trees grown in distant Dhofar. Its end was likely a tragic intersection of human ambition and geological reality. The very act of sustaining a large population in the desert, drawing water from deep wells, may have accelerated the erosion of the limestone cavern beneath them. One day, the ground simply gave way. The desert did not swallow a wicked city, but a prosperous and strategically vital one, its collapse perhaps reinterpreted over centuries as a moral lesson. This discovery forces a quiet reflection. How many other legends of lost cities are not fables about divine wrath, but haunting memories of very real and very fragile human achievement? Story is a monument to the delicate threads of commerce and the ground that can, without warning, cease to hold. A solitary giant lies on the slope of a desert hill, so immense it can only be seen by the sky. Far to the south of the lines, in the bone-dry expanse of Chile's desert, the largest human-like on Earth stares upward. This is the giant, a monumental figure stretching 119 meters from head to toe, longer than a football field. Its form is strikingly simple yet powerfully alien, with a square, block-like head, long straight legs, and arms held at its sides, crowned by what appear to be headdresses or antennae radiating from its crown. This is not art made to be walked beside, but to be witnessed from a vantage point no human of its time could reach. The figure is believed to have been created by the culture around 1,000 years ago, or possibly later by the Inca, who saw the desert as a sacred landscape. Its purpose, like its form, is drawn on a grand scale. One leading theory suggests it functioned as a massive astronomical calendar. The lines of its body and headdress may align with the rising and setting points of the moon throughout its complex 18.6-year cycle, a celestial clock etched into the earth to mark time for rituals or agricultural cycles tied to distant water sources. Another practical idea proposes it served as a guidepost for llama caravans traversing the brutal trade routes between the high Andes and the Pacific coast, a terrestrial landmark visible from miles away to orient travelers in a sea of sand and rock. The sheer act of its creation speaks to a unified communal vision. Workers would have carefully removed the dark, oxidized surface stones to expose the lighter, sandy soil beneath. creating a lasting contrast. They did this on a slope, maintaining the giant's precise proportions across a distance they could never fully perceive from the ground. This raises a profound question about belief. What shared understanding was so important that an entire community would labor to create a deity or a shaman they could only see in their collective mind's eye? The figure's remarkable preservation is a gift of this hyper-arid climate, where it might not rain for decades, allowing the giant to keep its silent watch over the centuries. Unlike the crowded gallery of, this is a solitary sentinel. To stand at its feet is to feel dwarfed not just by its size, but by the expanse of its meaning, a single, deliberate thought made permanent in the world's driest place. Roman ships sailed on the monsoon winds, seeking a harbor whose name was a byword for abundance. For centuries, the port on the coast of India glittered in the writings of Roman geographers and Tamil poets alike. It was the bustling, fragrant gateway where two great civilizations met. Here, the holds of Roman galleys were filled with mountains of priceless black pepper, shimmering silk, delicate Chinese porcelain, and brilliant gems, while Indian docks received in return gold coinage, fine Italian wine, and exquisite glassware from the workshops of Alexandria. This was not a remote outpost, but a cosmopolitan hub, a place where Tamil merchants negotiated with Roman agents, where languages and customs blended in a thriving market that connected the Mediterranean directly to the heart of the spice lands. The wealth of was so legendary that a Roman mural in Pompeii actually celebrated it, depicting the port as a vibrant, essential part of the empire's economic imagination. Then, sometime in the 14th century, it vanished from all maps. The vibrant trade link fell silent, and the port's precise location dissolved into local legend and scholarly debate. What could erase such a vital node from the world's memory? The culprit was likely a dramatic geographical change. Historical accounts and geological surveys point to a catastrophic flood of the river in the year 1341, an event so violent it may have radically reshaped the coastline, silting up the harbor and rendering it useless for deep draft ships. Alternatively, a series of smaller floods over time could have gradually choked the port with mud, slowly starving the city until it was abandoned. The once bustling wharves were buried under layers of earth, and the jungle reclaimed the streets. For generations, the search was a quest for a phantom. Then, at a site called, archaeologists began to uncover a world beneath the rice paddies. Their trowels revealed a network of brick structures, ancient wharves, and canals. The soil yielded a stunning diaspora of artifacts: Roman amphorae that once held wine, thousands of beads, shards of Yemeni pottery, and most tellingly, Roman coins and a Roman copper scroll granting customs exemption. Each find was a whisper from the dockside, confirming that this was a place of immense international exchange. The discovery of a dugout canoe made from a single tree, used for local transport, completed the picture of a working port. The loss of was more than the disappearance of a city. It was the severing of a major artery in the ancient global economy. When that direct sea link between Rome and India was cut, trade had to reroute through multiple intermediaries, becoming slower, costlier, and less direct. A whole channel of cultural and material exchange simply closed. This makes us wonder, as we look at our own globally connected world, what other vibrant, hybrid cultures have been completely erased by a shift in a river's path or the rising of silt. Stands as a powerful testament to an interconnected ancient world, a lost wonder that proves our drive to reach across oceans is as old as civilization itself. A different kind of obelisk never felt the Roman sun. While the empire proudly raised Egyptian monoliths in its circuses and forums, other giants remained trapped in the womb of the earth, commissioned but never born. Deep in the remote Egyptian desert at a place called Mons, the story of imperial ambition is told not by a polished spire, but by a colossal, half-carved shape still clinging to the living bedrock. This is the unfinished obelisk of the Roman world, a monument to a project that simply stopped. The scale of what was attempted here is breathtaking. Workers in this imperial quarry, a harsh outpost sustained by long supply lines, had begun the painstaking process of freeing a single piece of granite that would have rivaled the largest ever erected in Rome itself. You can see the precise channels they cut around its perimeter, the careful undercutting, the patient work of separating a 600-ton needle from the mountain. And then, at some unknown moment, the chiseling ceased. The workers packed their tools, the overseers moved on, and the giant was left in its bed, an eternal prisoner of the quarry floor. This abandoned project forces us to consider the staggering logistics behind the obelisks that did succeed. Transporting a finished monolith was a feat of engineering and nerve. The granite pillar would be dragged on sledges to the Nile, loaded onto a specially built, massive barge, and floated downriver to the Mediterranean. From there, it faced an open-sea voyage to a port like Ostia, before being transferred to another barge to be pulled up the Tiber River to Rome. The final erection in the city's heart was a public spectacle of ropes, pulleys, and wooden frameworks, a drama of human triumph over stone. So why, after investing so much initial effort, would Rome simply abandon a monolith halfway through? The reasons are as practical as they are poignant. A hidden flaw in the stone, a crack discovered deep within the granite, could render the entire project useless, as the risk of it splitting during transport or erection was too great. A shift in imperial politics could also mean a change in patronage, the death of an emperor who commissioned it, or a redirection of funds and labor to more pressing needs, like a war or a different monument. The quarry at Mons itself speaks to harsh reality, the immense human cost and resource drain of such projects in a remote, waterless landscape might have finally outweighed the symbolic gain. These silent, recumbent giants are wonders of a different sort. They are not testaments to success, but to ambition interrupted. They represent the immense resources, the thousands of work hours, the imperial will that was poured into a vision, and then, for reasons we can only guess, was allowed to evaporate. Archaeology often celebrates the finished masterpiece, the temple that stood for centuries. But these abandoned blocks tell a more human story, one of overreach, of changed plans, of practical reality crashing into symbolic dreams. They remind us that for every wonder that touched the sky, there were others that never left the ground, their stories frozen in the very stone that refused to become a monument. A Byzantine warship unleashed a torrent of liquid fire that clung to the water and devoured enemy sails, a weapon that felt less like technology and more like sorcery. This was Greek fire, the closely guarded secret that allowed the Eastern Roman Empire to dominate the Mediterranean for over 7 centuries, turning the tide of countless naval battles and saving Constantinople itself from sieges. Its properties were the stuff of nightmares for any opposing fleet. The substance, once ignited, could not be extinguished with water. In fact, some accounts suggest water only made it burn more fiercely. It was projected from bronze tubes mounted on the prows of ships, using a form of pressurized siphon that allowed crews to spray the flaming liquid in a continuous, terrifying stream. The true wonder, however, was not just the chemical mixture, but the impenetrable veil of secrecy that surrounded it. The formula was a state secret of the highest order, known only to the Byzantine emperor and a single, trusted family of artisans. This knowledge was compartmentalized and protected with a ferocity that rivals any modern classification system, a strategic advantage so vital that its secret died with the empire itself in the 15th century. Modern chemists and historians have pieced together plausible theories from fragmentary descriptions. The base was likely a form of crude petroleum or naphtha, drawn from natural oil seeps around the Black Sea. To this, they may have added quicklime, which ignites on contact with water or other compounds like resin or sulfur to make it sticky and long-burning. The precise recipe and the mechanics of the pressurized projector, however, remain just beyond our grasp. This raises a profound and timeless question about the nature of such power. When a society develops a weapon of decisive, terrifying capability, where does the responsibility lie in controlling that knowledge? The Byzantines chose absolute secrecy, ensuring their advantage, but also guaranteeing the technology's eventual extinction. Was this an act of strategic genius, or did it ultimately deprive the world of a chemical insight that might have had peaceful applications? Greek fire stands as a lost wonder of applied science and ruthless pragmatism, a flaming testament to the fact that some of history's most potent creations are those we are meant to forget. The wind howls across a high plateau, carrying dust through empty archways that once framed a city of 100,000 souls. On the stark border between modern Turkey and Armenia, the ruins of Ani rise like a shattered dream, a ghost city that was once called the City of 1001 Churches. In its 11th century prime, under the powerful dynasty, this was no provincial outpost, but a rival to Constantinople and Cairo, a dazzling metropolis of trade, faith, and staggering architecture. Its skyline was a forest of conical domes and elegant stone spires, protected by massive, double walls that snaked across the landscape. Within those walls, a cosmopolitan mix of Armenians, Georgians, Greeks, and merchants from across Asia filled bustling markets and prayed in churches, whose designs pushed the limits of medieval engineering. The Cathedral of Ani, completed in the year 1001, was a masterpiece of lightness and height, its pointed arches and intricate stone filigree foreshadowing Gothic styles that would emerge in Europe centuries later. Not far away stood the hauntingly beautiful Church of the Holy, a circular chapel of exquisite proportions, its precise geometry a testament to a profound understanding of sacred space. Yet this golden age was fragile. A devastating earthquake in 1316 shook the city's very foundations, cracking walls and toppling towers. This natural blow was followed by human ones, the sacking of the city by Mongol armies, and perhaps most fatally, a slow shift in the world's major trade routes that gradually strangled Ani's economic life. By the 18th century, the last residents had departed, leaving the city to the wolves and the relentless elements. Today, walking among these skeletal remains is an experience of profound silence. You step through the gaping doorway of a church where hymns once echoed, now hearing only the rustle of dry grass. You run a hand over carvings of saints and angels, their features softened by 8 centuries of rain and wind. The political status of Ani adds another layer of poignancy, a site of immense Armenian cultural heritage lying within modern Turkey, its conservation and story often caught in the delicate web of contested history. This ghost city forces a deeply personal reflection. What does it mean for a place of such dense human life, of prayer, commerce, laughter, and conflict to be utterly still? The stones of Ani are not just ruins, they are a physical map of ambition's limits. They tell us that a city, no matter how magnificent, is a covenant between civilization and circumstance, and when that covenant breaks, all that remains is a monument to memory itself, slowly being reclaimed by the bare, high plateau from which it once so proudly rose. His body was laid out in Babylon, but its final journey had only just begun. Alexander III, the king who had forged an empire from Greece to India, died in Babylon in 323 before the Common Era, leaving behind a kingdom and a profound mystery. His general, Ptolemy, secured the body and began a slow, ceremonial procession to bury him in Macedonia. Yet in a twist of fate, the procession was intercepted, and the body was rerouted to Egypt, where Ptolemy established his own dynasty. There, in the city Alexander himself had founded, the conqueror was finally laid to rest in a magnificent tomb that became the centerpiece of Alexandria, a site of pilgrimage for the ancient world's most powerful figures. Julius Caesar was said to have visited, overcome with emotion before the sarcophagus of his hero. The Roman Emperor Caracalla made a special trip to pay his respects, leaving his own ring and tunic as offerings. For centuries, the location was common knowledge, a landmark of living history. Then, sometime between the late Roman period and the Islamic era, the tomb vanished from all records. The city above it grew, shifted, and was rebuilt. The water table rose, potentially flooding subterranean chambers. Some historians suggest it may have been deliberately concealed during a period of religious transition, its pagan grandeur hidden from a new world view. Whatever the cause, the Earth closed over one of history's most significant resting places. The modern search has been a saga of tantalizing false leads and fervent hope. Excavations beneath modern Alexandria have revealed fascinating structures, like a mysterious alabaster tomb in the city's ancient royal quarter, but none have yielded the definitive proof needed. Each new theory, from a crypt beneath a mosque to a site now submerged in the city's harbor, captures the public imagination before fading back into speculation. The power of this missing tomb is entirely symbolic. To find Alexander's final resting place would be to touch the literal remains of a legend, to connect the physical world with a story that reshaped continents. It represents the ultimate prize for historical archaeology, not for gold, but for context, for the chance to finally complete the biography of a man who became a myth. The irony is both profound and haunting. The ruler who mapped the known world with his armies now has a biography that cannot find its final period on any map. His absence is a ghost in the historical record, a silent space where a giant should be, reminding us that even the most documented lives can dissolve into the very landscapes they sought to command. The clear blue shallows of the Bahamas revealed a puzzle that seemed to walk straight out of a prophecy. In 1968, pilots and divers off the coast of Bimini Island noticed something startling on the sea floor: a long, straight formation of massive, rectangular limestone blocks, laid out with such geometric precision it looked for all the world like a sunken cobblestone road. The discovery sent a shockwave through the world of alternative history, for it appeared to match an eerily specific prediction. Decades earlier, the famed psychic Edgar, while in a trance state, had that a portion of the lost continent of Atlantis would rise again near Bimini in the late 1960s. To his followers, this was not a curious rock formation, it was vindication, a literal piece of a sunken world breaking the surface of time. The Bimini Road, as it was instantly dubbed, became a central exhibit in the case for a forgotten, advanced civilization. The scientific explanation, however, tells a different, yet no less fascinating, story. Geologists who studied the site identified the material as a type of sandstone that forms naturally along tropical shorelines when sand and shell fragments are cemented together by calcium carbonate. This particular layer of, they explain, formed on an ancient beach thousands of years ago when sea levels were lower. As the land subsided and the sea rose, the layer was submerged. The key to its blocky appearance lies in a perfectly natural process. Has a tendency to fracture along parallel and perpendicular lines as it ages and is stressed by tectonic forces, creating neat, rectangular segments that can look astonishingly like cut stone. The straight line of the formation likely follows the contour of that ancient shoreline, a natural curve that appears straight from a limited perspective. Despite this clear geological consensus, the allure of the lost civilization theory has proven incredibly resilient. The Bimini Road became a cornerstone of pseudo-archaeology, a field that often prioritizes sensational narrative over evidence. It is frequently presented alongside other so-called anomalous sites as part of a global network of a prehistoric superculture, its natural origins dismissed as a cover-up by a closed-minded scientific establishment. This enduring debate highlights a profound and very human tension. Why does the idea of a paved road beneath the waves captivate us so much more than a beautifully fractured slab of ancient? Perhaps it speaks to a deep-seated longing for a grander, more mysterious past, a narrative where our ancestors were not just survivors, but master builders whose legacy now whispers to us from the ocean floor. The true wonder of the Bimini Road may not be in its origin, but in its power as a mirror. It reflects our powerful desire to find pattern and intention in the natural world, to see the hand of a lost human story even in the elegant, unconscious geometry of stone and time. A Greek legend claimed its founders were brought there in chains. After the great city of Troy fell, the story goes, Agamemnon allowed a group of Trojan prisoners of war to settle in a new place, a city they would name in the northeastern Peloponnese. For centuries, this origin tale was just that, a compelling myth linking a real place to Homeric epic. Yet the city itself was very real, known from ancient texts as a notably prosperous and independent community. It minted its own distinctive coins, which bore the image of a winged horse, and it thrived for centuries, even enjoying special favor under the Roman Empire. Then, like so many wonders, it vanished. Sometime after Slavic invasions in the early Middle Ages faded from all maps and records, its location dissolving into the landscape and local folklore. It became another phantom, a city known only by name. That changed dramatically in 2018. Near the modern village of, archaeologists led by made a series of stunning finds. They uncovered the foundations of robust houses, a complex network of streets, and a vast cemetery with burials spanning from the 4th century before the Common Era to the 4th century of the Common Era. The graves held a wealth of personal history, gold leaves placed on the eyes of the departed, intricate jewelry, coins, and vessels for offerings. Most tellingly, the architectural style and many of the artifacts showed a fascinating blend of Greek and Eastern influences, a material echo of that legendary Trojan heritage. This was not a random settlement. It was a substantial, wealthy urban center exactly where the ancient sources said should be. The discovery is in how history can reemerge. For years, archaeologists had found scattered clues in the area, marble fragments and old walls, but the breakthrough came from systematic survey and excavation, piecing together the silent evidence beneath the olive groves. The city did not announce itself with a towering monument, but with the quiet, cumulative weight of everyday life preserved in stone and soil. Its rediscovery forces a thrilling question upon us. If a city founded by mythic captives can step out of legend and into the archaeological record, what other foundational stories, currently dismissed as pure folklore, might be waiting for their confirming shovel stroke? Return is a powerful reminder that the map of the ancient world is not finished. It is still being drawn, one careful excavation at a time, proving that some lost wonders are not truly gone, they are merely waiting for us to learn how to see them again. Sailors swore they had seen its green shores rising from the Atlantic fog. For centuries, maps of the ocean west of Ireland faithfully included a circular island called Brazil, a place of perfect harmony and advanced knowledge, often shrouded in mist and only visible once every 7 years. It was just one of many spectral lands that haunted the edges of the known world, from St. Brendan's magical Isle of the Blessed to the terrifying Isle of Demons, marked on charts with illustrations of clawed beasts. These were not simple mistakes, but full-fledged phantoms of geography, born from a potent cocktail of human experience and yearning. A distant bank of fog on the horizon could solidify in a sailor's exhausted mind into a coastline. A rare optical illusion called where layers of air distort light could magnify a rocky outcrop into a floating city. Whispers from indigenous peoples about lands further west were woven into existing Celtic myths or saintly legends, creating hybrid places that felt as real as any port. Sometimes, the fiction was deliberate, a mapmaker adding a speculative island to fill an empty space or to claim knowledge their rivals lacked. These phantom islands served a crucial driving purpose. They were targets for ambition. The persistent legend of a vast island west of Portugal directly influenced Columbus's calculations as he sailed westward, expecting to find it as a waypoint to Asia. The hope of finding these mythical lands propelled expeditions, funded voyages, and expanded the literal margins of the map. Their eventual erasure was a slow triumph of collective accuracy. As navigators crisscrossed the oceans with better instruments and more meticulous logs, they would sail to a charted island's coordinates and find only empty sea. One by one, the ghosts were crossed out, labeled non-existent, or simply faded from new additions. This process of cartographic correction was a quiet revolution in how humanity understood its own planet. It reveals a profound truth about maps. They do not just record reality, they actively create it. For generations, Brazil was as real as Ireland on a parchment, a place that could be sought, discussed, and dreamed of. Its power resided entirely in ink and belief. These vanished islands are therefore wonders of a different order, monuments not of stone, but of collective imagination. They remind us that our picture of the world has always been a dialogue between what is actually there and what we desperately or fearfully wish to find. In that space between the measured line and the misty legend, entire worlds were born, lived in the minds of explorers, and then were gently returned to the realm of story, their purpose fulfilled not by being found, but by inspiring the search that made the real world so much larger. The jungle had preserved a library painted in color. Deep within the forest of Chiapas, Mexico, the Temple of the Murals had sat silent for over a millennium, its walls holding a secret narrative under a thick, protective skin of limestone calcification. When outsiders finally reached the site in 1946, they had no idea they were about to pull back a curtain on a lost world of Maya artistry. The three interior rooms they entered were not adorned with the static carvings of kings, but with a sprawling, vivid fresco cycle, a cinematic story in pigment that depicted the full spectrum of courtly life with startling intimacy and unflinching detail. Here was a royal court in preparation, with nobles adorned in resplendent quetzal feather headdresses and jade jewelry. Another scene exploded into the chaos of a brutal battle, warriors clashing on a temple staircase, captives being seized by their hair. The final chamber presented the solemn and consequential aftermath, a ritual of sacrifice where captives offered their life force to maintain the cosmic order. This was not propaganda carved in stone for eternity, but a more immediate, human record, painted with a palette derived from the earth itself, minerals and plants mixed into vibrant blues, reds, and the true wonder is not merely that these paintings exist, but that they survived at all. The very calcification that hid them for centuries acted as a perfect sealant, shielding the delicate pigments from the relentless humidity and biological growth that devours organic matter in the rainforest. It was a geological accident of preservation, a layer of stone that formed over the art, holding it in a state of suspended animation while the world outside changed utterly. This miracle forces a humbling realization. For every temple whose painted walls were shielded by such a fortunate accident, there were countless others whose stories dissolved. The Maya were a people who lived in color. Their palaces, their administrative buildings, even modest homes, were likely adorned with murals depicting histories, myths, and daily scenes. Imagine walking through a Maya city at its peak. You would not have seen the stone we associate with ruins today, but buildings awash in brilliant reds, blues, and yellows, their facades and interiors alive with painted narratives. The jungle humidity, while preserving stone, is the enemy of paint. Without a protective seal those pigments would have faded, flaked, and been washed away within generations, or been consumed by mold and algae. So we are left with a profound void in our understanding, framed by this single, spectacular survivor. What other stories were painted on those lost walls? Did they show scenes of marketplace commerce, of astronomers tracking the stars, of farmers tending their milpa fields? Were there epic poems or creation myths illustrated in grand halls, now returned to colored dust? The murals are a breathtaking window, but they are just one window in a palace that had 1,000 rooms. Each lost mural was a unique chapter in a civilization's dialogue with itself and its gods, a chapter we can now only try to reconstruct from the silent stones left behind. This tangible loss of painted history makes the next wonder all the more poignant, for it represents the loss of an entire system of thought, a way of seeing the world that was methodically erased, not by nature, but by human hands. The Uvimari Bay holds the shattered remains of a world-changing ambition. In the late 13th century, Khan, the Mongol ruler of China, set his sights on Japan, dispatching two of the largest invasion fleets the world had ever seen. The first, in 1274, carried perhaps 900 ships and tens of thousands of soldiers. It made initial landfall but was ultimately forced to withdraw. The second fleet, launched in 1281, was staggering in its scale, a vast armada of over 4,000 vessels carrying a force that may have exceeded 100,000 men. This floating army represented the zenith of Mongol power, a seemingly unstoppable force poised to conquer the island nation. Then, nature intervened with breathtaking fury. As the Mongol fleet lay at anchor off the Japanese coast, a colossal typhoon swept in. For 2 days, the storm raged, churning the sea into a maelstrom that smashed the wooden ships against each other and the rocky shore. The mighty invasion force was utterly annihilated, with the vast majority of ships and lives lost to the waves. To the Japanese, who saw their nation saved from certain conquest, these storms were not mere weather. They were the kamikaze, the divine wind, a direct intervention by the gods to protect the sacred islands. This event became a cornerstone of Japanese national identity, a powerful narrative of divine favor and resilient isolation that would echo for centuries. For generations, the Lost Fleet was just a legend, a story of divine intervention. Then, underwater archaeologists began to explore the silty bottom of Imari Bay. Their discoveries brought the scale of the disaster into sharp physical focus. They found massive, stone Mongol-style anchors, still lying where they were dropped in a desperate attempt to ride out the storm. They recovered shattered timbers from the ships themselves, their construction techniques revealing the hurried, multinational effort behind the fleet, built by Korean and Chinese shipwrights under Mongol command. The seabed was also littered with personal artifacts, ceramic storage jars that once held supplies, fragments of weaponry, and even the humble implements of daily life aboard a troopship. Each object is a silent witness to the final, chaotic moments of a grand campaign. This sunken graveyard is a wonder of a historical turning point preserved in mud and timber. It represents a moment where geopolitical destiny was decided not by generals or emperors, but by the raw, indifferent power of the natural world. To see these scattered anchors is to feel the immense weight of that thwarted ambition, a planned conquest that now rests in the quiet dark, a monument to the fact that history can pivot on a single, furious wind. We can read their words, but we can no longer hear their songs. Across the ancient world, from the lyres of Sumerian courts to the complex water organs of Rome, music was the breath of civilization, woven into every ritual, every celebration, every moment of mourning. We have found their instruments, beautifully preserved lyres from and elegant Roman flutes. We have the lyrics, poems meant to be sung. Yet the actual sound, the melody and rhythm that gave those words life, is a wonder almost entirely lost to silence. This is not a missing monument, but a missing sense, a hole in our historical hearing. A few precious fragments of musical notation have survived the centuries, like time capsules of sound. The epitaph, a small Greek column from the 1st century, bears a short, complete song with its notation carved right beside the lyrics, a personal hymn to eternal life. Then there are the Delphic hymns to Apollo, inscribed on stone in the 2nd century before the Common Era, some of the longest pieces of ancient music we possess. Holding these stones is like holding a recorded disc with no player. The instructions are there, but the key to reading them fluently has faded. The central challenge is profound. We have the notes, but we lack the living tradition that taught musicians how to interpret them. The notations do not clearly convey rhythm, tempo, or the intricate microtonal scales that ancient ears would have understood intuitively. Was a particular note held long or short? Was the tempo stately or lively? The stone does not say. This has led modern musicians and scholars to become detectives of sound, attempting reconstructions based on painstaking study of the symbols, the instruments they were played on, and the cultural context of the pieces. The results are fascinating, but they vary wildly. One reconstruction of a Delphic hymn might sound solemn and liturgical, like a slow chant in a vast temple. Another interpretation of the same notation, using a different theoretical approach, might sound almost like a lively folk dance. Each version is a plausible guess, a shadow of the original cast by the light of our own understanding. This forces a deeply personal reflection. What was the true soundtrack to the ancient world? Was it the complex, mathematically precise harmonies Pythagoras wrote about, or the driving, ecstatic rhythms of a Dionysian festival? Did a Roman legion march to a simple, pounding drum, or to sophisticated horn melody that lifted their spirits across miles of dusty road? We can study the instruments and read the lyrics, but the emotional core, the specific combination of sounds that made a Greek mother weep or an Egyptian priest feel the presence of the gods, has dissolved into the air. It is a reminder that history is not just a visual record of things built and battles fought. It is also a sensory experience, a world filled with specific smells, textures, and sounds that shaped how people felt and thought. The lost music of antiquity is perhaps the most intimate vanished wonder of all, for it was the sound of the human heart in eras we can only otherwise see from a great and silent distance. His legendary wealth was measured in talents of gold and the gleam of a temple. For the source of King Solomon's fortune has been one of history's most enduring treasure hunts. The Bible describes unimaginable riches, gold, silver, and precious stones flowing into Jerusalem to build the first temple and adorn the king's palace, wealth so vast that silver was said to be as common as stones. This narrative gave birth to the ultimate lost material wonder, the fabled mines of King Solomon, a single mythical source of endless bounty. The search for these mines has drawn explorers, archaeologists, and fortune seekers across continents for centuries, each hoping to find the literal of biblical splendor. Early searches focused on the ancient copper mines in modern Israel, a site with evidence of sophisticated mining operations dating to Solomon's era. The stark, beautiful landscape there, with its natural pillars and colorful rock, certainly feels like a place of ancient industry, but the scale could not account for the legendary gold. This led the search further south, into the heart of Africa. For generations, European explorers were convinced that the stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe, which we discussed earlier, were the ruins of the biblical Ophir, the port from which Solomon's ships brought back gold, ivory, and apes. This theory, though born from colonial assumptions that Africans could not have built such a city, nonetheless shows how powerfully the legend pulled the map of exploration. The modern consensus among historians and archaeologists offers a more complex, and perhaps more fascinating, truth. The mines of King Solomon were almost certainly not a single, secret location, but rather a vast and sophisticated network. Solomon's kingdom sat at a crucial crossroads, controlling trade routes that connected Egypt, Arabia, Mesopotamia, and Africa. His wealth came not from a secret tunnel, but from a masterful system of taxation, tribute, and long-distance commerce. He exploited existing copper mines in the valley, like those at. His alliance with the Phoenician king provided access to maritime trade, sending ships down the Red Sea to distant ports like Ophir, which was likely a trading emporium in East Africa or southern Arabia, a place where gold, incense, and exotic goods were gathered from many interior sources. In this view, the mines were a metaphorical term for an entire economic empire, a web of extraction and exchange that funneled wealth to Jerusalem. This blurring of specific location into a grand legend had profound real-world consequences. The dream of finding Solomon's mines directly fueled European colonial ventures into Africa, a quest for gold that often masked a deeper drive for territorial control. The legend became a catalyst, proving that a story could be as powerful a motivator as any map. As we reach the end of our list of 50 lost wonders, these elusive mines serve as a perfect final contemplation. They represent the human obsession with finding the singular source, the fountainhead of power and prosperity. We are compelled to pinpoint the exact cave, the precise valley, the one spot on the map where history's greatest fortunes began. Yet so often, the truth is more diffuse. The real wonder was not a hole in the ground, but the vision to see potential in a landscape, the diplomacy to build alliances, and the ambition to weave a network that could span a continent. The mines are lost because they were never a place to be found on a map, but a process, a system of human endeavor whose physical traces have melted back into the deserts and mountains, leaving only the golden echo of a story that forever invites us to look. Across 50 stories of vanished glory, a single, haunting pattern emerges. These lost wonders, from sunken cities to shattered statues, are not random tragedies, but chapters in a much larger conversation between humanity and the universe. They speak to four relentless forces that have shaped our entire history: ambition, ingenuity, faith, and the inevitable reclamation by nature, time, and conflict. We build to touch the heavens, to master our environment, to connect with the divine, and in the end, the earth, the sea, or the shifting sands of human affairs patiently takes it all back. This cycle is the true story. Yet, why does the absence of these places pull at us so powerfully? The answer lies deep within our own psychology. A mystery is an open door, an invitation to adventure. A blank space on the map is not an end, but a beginning for the imagination. These gaps in the historical record trigger a fundamental human drive, our need to explore, to solve, to complete the picture. They whisper that the story we have been told is incomplete, that there are whole civilizations, technologies, and artistic traditions that flourished and faded without leaving a clear trace for the textbooks. This forces a humbling and thrilling question upon us: how much of the human past is still out there, waiting in a jungle, under a farmer's field, or beneath the silent pressure of the deep sea? Every lost wonder is a reminder that history is not a fixed script, but a living puzzle, and we are still finding the pieces. This leads us to a final, reflective thought, one that turns the lens from the past to the future. If these societies, with all their brilliance, could build such marvels only to see them vanish from common memory, what does that mean for our own world? Look at the towering cities, the global networks, the digital empires we are constructing today. Which of our achievements, which of our own centers of power and belief, might one day become a tantalizing mystery for a future civilization to ponder? What will the archaeologists of the year 5000 find, or more intriguingly, fail to find, when they sift through the layers of our time? The legacy of these 50 lost wonders is not merely a catalog of beautiful ruins, but a profound lesson in perspective. They teach us that wonder is not in permanence, but in the attempt, not in the stone that survives, but in the spirit that dared to place it there, reaching always for something just beyond the horizon. The journey ends not with a final answer, but with a deeper appreciation for the questions themselves. We have traveled across 5,000 years and every continent, from the sunken streets of, to the impossible balance of the hanging pillar, from the whirring gears of the mechanism to the silent, painted stories of. These 50 lost wonders are not a simple list of ruins. They are a collective testament to a single, undeniable truth. History is not just the story of what survived. It is also the haunting, resonant echo of what was lost. Each vanished city, each dismantled statue, each silent melody represents a gap in our understanding, a missing piece in the grand mosaic of the human experience. It is within those gaps, in the quiet spaces between the known facts, that the true depth of our past is revealed. By confronting these absences, by asking what is not there, we are forced to look more closely at the fragments we do have. A single stone from the mausoleum at Halicarnassus becomes more precious when we know it was once part of a towering pyramid. A Roman copy of a Greek sculpture carries the ghost of a lost bronze original. The search for these wonders, whether through archaeology, scholarship, or simply the power of imagination, does more than satisfy curiosity. It fundamentally deepens our respect for the creativity and resilience of those who came before us. They built not just for their own time, but with a hope, however fragile, for a legacy. Their ambitions were swallowed by the sea, buried by the desert, or taken apart for new purposes, yet the echo of their effort still shapes our world. So what is the final lesson carried on the wind from these silent places? Perhaps it is this: the greatest wonder of all may not be any single temple or tomb. It is the endless human capacity to imagine something magnificent, to marshal incredible will to build it, and then, centuries later, to feel the irresistible pull to seek it out once more. Our journey through what was lost ultimately tells a story about who we are, creatures forever drawn to the mystery of our own legacy, finding meaning not only in what remains, but in the beautiful, compelling void of what does not. Which of these 50 wonders left you most fascinated, most eager to learn? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this exploration, be sure to subscribe. Our next journey into the mysteries of the past is always just beginning.